Black is back.
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 Black is
Black
back.
is back.
Black is back.
Black is back.
Black is back. And the rallying call is Black is back. And all of those people who wanted to be mobilized and do work without fear of being criticized.
I would like to welcome everybody to the Black is Back Day 2 conference, the coalition itself. I'm going to talk a little bit about the coalition itself. The Black is Back Coalition is an organization of organization. It is the political instrument in which the members, organization, individuals exercise united political will and action on an anti-imperialistic resistance. The BIC is the BIBC is an activist organization that believes in self-determination for African people and is led by African people. In addition, while the coalition exercises united political will, it also recognizes that the representative coalition organization have different political philosophies. Furthermore, the BIBC recognize the right of each organization in the coalition to work independently on issues affecting the African community. I'm excited today to be part of this. Yesterday was a tremendous day one, and I just want to say that to everybody here, you're welcome, and we appreciate you, and we're glad that you're listening to everything that we're saying today. And we would like to say this to you, if we don't do the work, God may forgive us, but history will not forgive us if we don't get out here and do the work. I am the president of the Black Autonomy Network Community Organization, president and CEO, and our work consists of mostly getting political prisoners out of prison. What we've done, we've been successful since 2017 when I first was released from prison. And in 2017, we have got 17 out of 21 commutations of people who had over 600 years in prison. And we're working hard, along with Black is Back Coalition, we're working hard to be able to do the things that we need to do in order to be successful. And this is really what we're all about. We want people to come and listen and understand where we're going, what we need to do, what we have to do, and this is what Black is Back Coalition is all about. At this time, I want to turn it over to our host, Akia, from there. I know. Forgive me if I didn't.
All right. All right. My name is Alikia Ngoma. I'm the secretary of the Black is Back Coalition for Social Justice, Peace, and Reparations. And as Reverend Pinckney said, we would like to thank everybody for tuning in with us for the second day of our conference. As stated before, we originally had our electoral campaign school scheduled for this weekend. That would have been yesterday and today. And because of the coronavirus or the colonial virus, we had to push it back. And if you were tuned in yesterday, you will see that we really discussed the colonial virus in a way that no other coalition would do. We talked about it, how to affect, in relationship to Black community control of the police, reparations, education, healthcare, and all of those things. We also felt it very necessary to address the electoral season that is unfolding right now. Had we had the school, that would have been much of what we're talking about. But the season itself, we felt like it was too important, and the type of analysis that we have is too important to not address it, especially during this time. So that will be the bulk of today's discussion. Before I introduce our speaker, I would like to just restate the members of the Black is Back Coalition Steering Committee. As Reverend Pinckney just said, we have 17 organizations. It is an organization of organizations. And we have Chairman Omali Yeshitela, who is the chair of the Black is Back Coalition, as well as the chairman of the African People's Socialist Party. We have myself, Alikia Ngoma, the secretary. We have Comrade Timba Shabanda, who is our social media and graphics coordinator. We have David Lance, who is the media coordinator. We have Ikinge Mayele, who is the logistics coordinator. We have Sister Leesa Dayvus, who is the vice chair of the coalition. We have Brother Glenn Ford, who is a founding member of the coalition. We have Brother Ajamu Baraka, who represents the Black Alliance for Peace. He is also a speaker of today's program. We have Sister Betty Davis, who represents the New Abolitionist Movement, as well as chairs the Education Working Group. We have Ralph Pointer, who chairs the Free All Political Prisoners Working Group, as well as represents the Lynn Stewart organization. Brother Cam Howard, who chairs the Reparations Working Group, as well as represents the Amos N. Wilson Institute on the coalition. We have Sister Nellie Bailey, who chairs the Halt Gentrification Working Group, as well as represents the Harlem Fight Back Against Gentrification organization. Sister Belinda Parker Brown, who represents the Louisiana United International. Reverend Edward Pinkney, who represents the Black Autonomy Network Community Organization. Diab Olugbala, who chairs the Black Community Control of the Police Working Group. Jihad Abdul Mamit, who represents the Jericho Movement. Khalid Rahim, who is the chairman of the New African Independence Party. Lawrence Ham, who leads the People's Organization for Progress. And Zaki Baroudi, who is the Master General of the Universal African People's Organization. So that is who we are. And
that's President General.
President General.
Okay.
President General. I invite everybody who is seeing us for the first time to visit blackisbackcoalition.org. You're going to hear this website a lot today. That's how you find out who we are, and we're going to make a call for you to join as well. So now I would like to introduce our chairman, Omali Yeshitela, who will be providing the political overview for today's program. He is speaking to us from St. Petersburg, Florida. So Uhuru, Chairman Omali Yeshitela.
Uhuru, I want to thank you very much, Comrade Elikia, and I would like to join you in greeting the steering committee of the coalition. It's an incredible organization with an incredible array of leaders who participate as a part of the steering committee from various organizations and institutions. And again, we're talking about people, some of whom have worked for generations in the struggle of our people and fought for the liberation of our people. And all of whom have been engaged in some way or another in fighting against U.S. imperialism. And so I wanted to just recognize you. I also wanted to have, just to say that there are some people who ordinarily would be a part of the discussions that we've been having. And I wanted to just say something about their absence. And I'm speaking specifically about Comrade Nellie Bailey, who has a longtime warrior, a fierce warrior, been in the trenches for a long time, one of the first people out of the gate in opposition to Barack Hussein Obama being imposed on our people. And Comrade Sister Nellie has for a while now been dealing with certain health issues, and none, as far as we know, have been related to this COVID-19, but it's struggles she's been dealing with for a while. And that's one of the reasons why she's not here. And our dear comrade, Glenn Ford, who the health issue revolves around his voice. And anybody knows Glenn, his voice is one of the most important instruments that he has, that he uses as a communicator, as somebody, you know, who is an amazing journalist. And so he's had some issues with his voice right now, which is one of the reasons he's not here. So I wanted to acknowledge these two comrades and the fact that they're not here, and you know the role that they've played in this coalition and in our struggle for a long period of time. And so, and also for those of you who didn't know, Charles Barron is out of the hospital. I spoke to him about 3 days ago, I think it was, to him and his wife, Inez. Charles was stricken with the virus. He's right there in New York, which for a long period of time was the epicenter of this COVID-19 attack on our people. And he is doing well, and he got out of the hospital, and even from his recovery position was fighting against the governor's budget that was, even as he's on TV, one of the darlings of the liberals in this country, and expressing so much empathy for people experiencing this assault by COVID-19, by the coronavirus. On the other hand, he is somebody who was liquidating things like Medicaid and all kinds of other things in the budget in New York that would take away capacity of the people to deal with their health issues. I just wanted to, again, thank everybody for being here. And I don't have that much to say, except that we initiated this this conference, this 2-day conference, because the initial school that we had planned, the electoral school for today and yesterday, had to be canceled. It was an in-person event that was going to be held in St. Louis, Missouri. And the coronavirus made it impossible for us to be able to do that. So we postponed this until June. And right now it's tentatively scheduled for, I think someone said June 13th. I think that's what the secretary just said. And, but we were concerned because we did not want to miss this opportunity to speak to this electoral season, this election season right now, where the issue of the presidency of the United States is something that's been contested, at least nominally or publicly so. And we initiated the school in the first place because African people, we wanted to deal with how we approach this whole question of elections. And we wanted to demystify the electoral process. So there are so many people who approach the question of election, especially those who have been posited as our leaders, as if it were something in the Bible, that you got to struggle for political influence and power through the electoral process. And that's been a complicated issue for African people in this country, especially since the defeat of our revolution of the 1960s, where the United States government engaged in all-out warfare, war without terms against our people. And I'm looking at, some of the people who are in this meeting now, and how for example, in Chicago, where an incredibly significant front of the revolution of the 1960s, and how Fred Hampton was murdered in his sleep by the United States government. And when he was attempting to advance a political agenda for African people there. And we know that others were killed. Malcolm was killed, King was killed in this country. And of course, throughout the world, we saw others fall to the machinations of imperial white power. And so the government destroyed the revolutionary movement, and some not even quite so revolutionary. I mean, Martin Luther King was pushing forth a program, a radical democratic program for talking about a sort of a campaign, a people's campaign, and that was Senate to be held in Washington, D.C. And King was assassinated, and it was going to be quite a radical campaign that he had initiated. And so, this kind of offensive was made against our movement, and people who were organizing on the ground. We're talking about this virus, COVID virus, as COVID-19, the coronavirus. But, sickle cell anemia was something that it only attacked African people, or primarily African people. And it was a political question, just as this thing that we're dealing with now is a political question. And the Black Panther Party was able to unleash forces of ordinary working class people to go to the housing projects and various other places that we live and initiate a campaign of sickle cell anemia testing. This is the thing that embarrassed the United States government to the point that it was forced to take sickle cell anemia testing into the hospital for every African child for a while. I don't know if they still do that, but at one juncture they were forced to do it by the work that was being done on the ground by just ordinary African working class militants. So the government crushed this revolutionary movement. And it crushed the democratic movement that we were engaged in, that people like Fannie Lou Hamer were critical to, Ella Baker, critical parts of this movement. And and then as we were waging the struggle for the right to vote and participate in the electoral process, which is what much of the civil rights movement, the movement for democracy of the African people in this country, that's what it revolved around. And there are people in this meeting who went to jail just trying to get African people registered, or who were threatening just to register to join the Democratic Party. And the Democratic Party wasn't then, isn't ever been a revolutionary organization, but that's what happened. And so at the moment we would gain access to the voting booth, to the electoral process. At the moment, what is characterized as universal suffrage was brought to this country by African people. The United States government was initiating this campaign to kill us and destroy the organizations of our people and the programs of our people that might have put a national, revolutionary national democratic campaign on the agenda. There is no agenda now. Now the agenda is that of the Democratic Party. And this is really important because it's subsequent to this. Now we hear that Black people don't want to vote. Black people are too apathetic about voting. That's why we don't vote. But the truth is nobody in this country faced the kind of hell, the dangers, the bombings, the killings, the lynchings, the shootings that African people did just for the right to vote. And so what happened, of course, is that we got shot out of that process. The leaders got killed. And then they said, now you can vote, when there was nothing, as Malcolm might say, there was nothing to vote for except the Democratic Party. And Africans quickly learned that there was nothing there for us. And our movement as a whole became quite conflicted about whether or not the electoral process was the way to our freedom. And now we're at a place where we have conceded in many ways the electoral process to the petty bourgeoisie, that sector of the middle class who made a career out of selling us out. And they appear to speak for us because they dominate this whole electoral arena. They dominate it. They are the ones who, if we see anybody, hear anybody, like speaking of Chicago again, we have a situation of a revolutionary Fred Hampton who upset the entire apple cart in Chicago and much of the country. And at the time, the guy who was formerly officially the leader of the Black Panther Party that Fred was a member of, Bobby Rush, who was the Minister of Defense at the time. And now we see Bobby Rush, Fred Hampton is dead and Bobby Rush being purchased by Bloomberg. And so he becomes Bloomberg's emissary. But before this, Rush had called for sending the National Guards into housing projects there. So this is what people have been left with. And so the coalition took it upon ourselves to try and interpret the significance of the electoral process for African people and to open it up so that we can bring the masses of African people into it, not just as spectators watching these very smart people tell us what to do, but arming the people so that they can participate themselves. And so that we initiated a national Black political agenda. We traveled around this country for more than a year. we held more than 10 state conventions and one in the Washington, D.C. itself. And then we had a national convention in D.C. to adopt the national Black political agenda for self-determination. So now this becomes the politic, the agenda that we are demanding that all politicians, all people who are running for office or who want a relationship with us would have to adhere to. So we did the schools. And the schools provided us an opportunity, again, to demystify the electoral process, to teach people how to run, and also teach people how to punish those who were in office and who went against the interests of our people. We, through this process, were able to bring forward people like Rev. Pointer, who could talk about the political prisoners and say that if we're running for office, then we should have on our agenda, our platform should deal with the question of political prisoners. And Sister Betty Dayvus, who said that we need to talk about education. These are things in community control of education. Cam Howard, around the issue of reparations and Black community control of police. Throughout the thing, we said now we are putting forth a national Black political agenda, and we're going to utilize the electoral process to destroy the monopoly on this process that's now held by sellout sectors of our community. That's part of what it was that we're about. And now this is a very critical moment in history. This election is critical. And when I say it's critical, I don't mean it's critical because the imperialists think it's important or something like that. It's critical because the system itself is in severe distress. There's a severe crisis of what we call imperialism. And when we say a crisis of imperialism, we're not just talking about what's typically meant by Marxists when they say stuff like overproduction and stuff like that. We're talking about the crisis of imperialism revolving around the fact that the ruling class, the imperialists, the corporations, the bosses do not have easy access to the kinds of resources upon which the whole system rests, as they used to have in the past, which is why you have a situation of permanent warfare. This is having to do with the electoral process. And what we're talking about when we talk about our 19-point national Black political agenda for self-determination. Trump ran as a candidate who was opposed to war. And Trump ran as an anti-war candidate. Trump ran talking about pulling troops out of these various places, Syria and Afghanistan, and et cetera, on the one hand. And the Democratic Party, who had previously been, was able to pretend to be the party of peace, et cetera, revealed itself as a war party. You had generals speaking and coming out for demanding war, et cetera, and condemning Trump for not being a war candidate. So this is the kind of thing that we saw. This had to do with the whole crisis of imperialism because it was an existential crisis that began even before COVID-19. It was a crisis that was initiated by the resistance of peoples around the world trying to take back our resources, and also the introduction in a major way of China and less major of Russia into the economic and political situation that has resulted in a reconfiguring of the world economy, even as we have this discussion now. And so peoples have been involved in struggle, and we got this election coming up, and this and you have a situation of perpetual warfare because of a need to maintain the status quo, maintain an imperial white power resting on a base of colonized peoples around the world. And this is the crisis. This is why there's war. This is why you can't get Bernie Sanders, who is the darling of the liberals, to really come out against war, against imperialist warfare. He comes out on more or less the same side as some of the others, with some differences only being in tactics and things like that. The system itself is experiencing serious distress. And that's why right now it's so important that the oppressed, the colonized, take advantage of this in moving forward. So we want to have this discussion around the elections and what it means right now. And we need to be able to understand what these persons in our own communities who are supposed to be our leaders, like the aforementioned Rush and others, how they are embracing some of the worst aspects of programmatic exploitation and oppression of our people and the peoples of the world. Why is that happening? What does this mean? What does this mean? And how we should move. So I want to, you know, there's so much more that can be said and will be said. We have an incredible panel that's going to be coming before us. And I just wanted to say that also, finally, that the coalition has just finished a souvenir booklet as a fundraiser. And I think before this event is over today, we'll say something about it. And it is also a celebration of the 10 years of struggle by the coalition, 10 years of unity and struggle by the coalition. And that's a remarkable history for many times people who never knew each other before coming into this relationship, that had to learn to even trust each other in this relationship, and to be able to unite around basic principles of unity and hold it together. And we've done that now going on 11 years. And so there's a souvenir brochure that will be a booklet that will be mentioned before this is over, so that it's available to everybody for purchase and otherwise to get. And so I just wanted to say that and express my appreciation to this remarkable steering committee that's going to be moving this program forward on today. Uhuru.
Uhuru, Chairman.
Chair, very good. Yeah, I just want to give I just want to thank the Chairman Omali for the political overview. I want to thank him for his leadership here. I want to thank him for all he do, because without him, I don't know where we would be. Matter of fact, he's one of the main reasons why I'm here, and I'm part of the Black is Back conference. And I just want to thank you, Chairman, for that wonderful, wonderful overview. At this time, I'd like to introduce the panel and the speakers. And I'll start off with Ajamu, my very good friend, one of the guys who, when I was in prison, he came to visit me. Ajamu was the 2016 Green Party candidate for vice president. He is also the national organizer for the Black Alliance for Peace. He is a self-described human rights defender who experienced spanned 4 decades of domestic and international education and activism. His roots are in the Black liberation movement and apartheid Central American solidarity struggle. Ajamu is one of our great speakers, and he will be speaking as of now. Thank you so much.
Uhuru.
Uhuru.
All power to the people.
Power to the people.
Thank you so much, Reverend Pickney. Inspiration for me, a true freedom fighter who puts it on the line. When the rulers attempt to try to intimidate us, there's some folks that can't be intimidated. And our dear brother is one of them. And he has paid a price as a consequence. So it's a pleasure to be introduced by Reverend Pickney. It's a pleasure to be part of this gathering with all of these freedom fighters that we have in this coalition, and all of the people who got up this early Sunday morning to sign up and to come into this very, very important, indeed, perhaps historic conversation. Let me also too thank our dear leader, our brother Chairman, for so many things, including in his intro this morning, taking a big piece of my presentation. So I have to scramble a little bit in this presentation, because of course, what the chairman did was to provide a historical framework. You know, you can't talk about the African petty bourgeoisie. You can't talk about the structure of the African class structure without having that placed into some kind of historical context. So I want to talk about that and move that to our discussion of the contemporary political scene and the electoral process and how we relate to it, have related to it in the past. I started by saying, basically, it's important for us to understand that, as Cabral reminded us, without revolutionary theory, there could be no revolution. We have to have a basic understanding of the objective conditions that face our people in order for us to transform those conditions. Now, that's important too, because, in this contemporary period, we find a lot of idealism. That instead of us applying a materialist framework and understanding for what is unfolding, particularly when it comes to policies being articulated by the ruling elements, we see that there's a lot of analysis based on psychology, attempts to try to read the psychology of a Trump or a Biden or whoever, as opposed to looking at the objective class forces that they represent and how those class forces are connected to the structure of this economy and the politics that they are in fact advancing. So when we take a look at the role of the African petty bourgeoisie, we have to take a look at that history in terms of how that class has evolved and what kinds of changes have taken place and how those changes that took place are related to the politics of this settler colonial project in the United States of America. One place we started, and Chairman Omali touched on it, for me at least too also, is that you can't understand the contemporary politics in the African petty bourgeoisie without going back at least to the 1970s. And the 1970s are important because this was the period in which the state intensified its counterinsurgency, its counter-revolutionary targeting of our movement. And the state had two basic objectives. Basically, it was to militarily defeat the Black liberation movement, but they had an ideological objective too. And that was basically to make the African into an American. And that is in some ways even more devastating than the military defeat of our movement, because our ability to defend ourselves and to advance our interests, we're gonna advance that, we're gonna develop that, we're gonna strengthen that. But it makes it more difficult to do that when we have to deal with the subjective element. The fact that today we have to deal with the fact that so many of our people have lost that critical perspective, have identified to an extent with the American, so-called American project. And that process, as I said, really intensified in the 1970s. And part of what they did to make the African an American was expand the ranks of the petty bourgeoisie through state employment and the incorporation of this element into the corporations. The first CEO, the first whatever in these corporations. And what happened was a transformation of that class, because traditionally we know that the Black petty bourgeoisie, as well as the bourgeoisie, was always organically connected to our people, to our community. That's how they survived. That was the material basis of their existence. The Black bourgeois business person was dependent on the Black market that we provided. The Black petty bourgeoisie was dependent on us. Like many of you all, I grew up with when we could go to a doctor, we went to a Black doctor. We had a Black dentist. In our schools on the South Side of Chicago, the colony of the South Side of Chicago, 90%, really 95% of our teachers were African, okay? So there was that organic connection between that class and us. But as a consequence of those differences, those changes in the 1970s, what we see was that there was a disconnection, a psychological, a political, and ideological, and even a physical separation between those classes and the rest of our folks. And it had a profound impact. It was a contradictory process too, because as that class was disconnecting psychologically and politically, at the same time though, they had a material basis for advancing themselves through their participation in the electoral process. You know, by running themselves as the mayors and members of the city council and county commissions, they created for themselves a material base for them to continue the process of advancing their class interests. We remember that when they took over these various cities during that decade and into the 80s to a certain extent, they were able to do things like these set-asides, where they would devote a certain amount of their budgets, city budgets, to the aspirations of these Black business people. People like Herman Russell in Atlanta, who became a multi-million dollars as a consequence of that process. And that took place across the country, okay? So this was the differences that were taking place, this process of making the African an American, giving the African at least the petty bourgeoisie, a material stake in this system. And this is what we have to deal with. You know, you take a look at our politics and look at 1968, when Dr. King was assassinated. What was he doing? He was in Memphis. He was fighting with Black sanitation workers, trying to win dignity for those workers, okay, who went out on strike for their dignity. You then compare that to 1973, after they murdered Dr. King and after the full assault on our movement was taking place. 1973, in Atlanta, Georgia, you had the first Black mayor, Maynard Jackson, who came to power. What was the first thing that Maynard Jackson did in 1973? The Black sanitation workers said, well, we got a Black mayor now and we helped put him in place. Now we want to have an increase in benefits and salaries. And so let's make this demand to this Black mayor to address our material needs after we help put him in office. And what did Maynard Jackson do? He attacked the union and just about broke it. Here you have us mobilizing to protect union rights in Memphis in 1968 against a white administration. And just 5 years later, 1973, this Black administration attacks and destroys Black sanitation workers. Class is important that we recognize that, because this class is a class that has consciousness of itself, of its interests, and is all out for itself. So this process of the Americanization of the African really had its culmination, if you will, in my opinion, with the election of Barack Hussein, and many of us say insane, Obama. That basically this was the process of our people having a psychological and emotional investment in this settler colonial project. And it's been a devastating consequence as a result. But this process is a historical process, as we said. This class, this petty bourgeois and bourgeois class, we saw it got behind Bill Clinton in the 1990s. It gave its support to the policies of the Bill Clinton administration as it dismantled the New Deal programs, the attack on welfare as we knew it, the crime bill, the creation of the militarization of the border in preparation for NAFTA, and the aggressive expansion of the neoliberal project. They gave their support to Clinton, and then of course to the Obama administration. They saw their interests tied up with the candidacies of Elizabeth Warren, and now with Joe Biden. This class is clear about its particular interests. And so we have to be clear about our particular interests as we organize ourselves and participate in this electoral process. So we participate in it, but we understand that we do it strategically. We're not confused about the possibilities of this electoral arena. In fact, we understand its real limitations, and we see those limitations being played out every day. We saw what happened with the soft social democracy of Bernard Sanders and his capitulation to the DNC. We saw the fact, and we see the fact that there's been no real commitment on the part of the DNC to win progressives offices on the local and state levels. So we go into this arena, but we go into this arena with consciousness. We understand its limitations, but we see that it is a place where millions of our people participate, and therefore we have to be there to contest in that arena. So my brothers and sisters, we have a lot of work to do. But basically, if we're going to participate in this electoral arena, we have to do it consciously. We have to do it in an organized fashion. And that's really and is part of what we've been trying to do with the Black is Back Coalition and these electoral schools, to bring people together so that we can look at how we address this electoral arena, to what degree we can advance a revolutionary project where we can understand how we can get access to our people in order to raise the consciousness of our people, to understand how this electoral process might be able to facilitate us building alternative movements. So we see this basically as an arena to be contested, and an arena that allows us to move ourselves toward our ultimate objectives. We don't see the electoral process as an end in itself. You see it as just a convenient instrument, an arena that helps us to build alternative power. We understand the protracted nature of this fight that we're in. And so our participation in this arena has to be seen as part of that process of building independent, alternative, revolutionary structures. That's our objective, to get access to the people, to raise the awareness of our people, to strengthen our organizations and our institutions for the ultimate fight that we have to engage in. Because we are involved in a fight. We are engaged in a war. And we have to make sure that this war does not continue to be a one-sided war. So this is part of our building our capacity to resist, building our capacity to be victorious. Because it's not just having a correct analysis, my friends. It's also being able to project a vision and understanding of where we need to go. And that understanding is coming because this process of this pandemic has really exposed the true nature of the system. People are becoming radicalized, if you will. Right. The power of the capitalist dictatorship has been able to be advanced because of its ability to conceal the fact that it is, in fact, a capitalist dictatorship. But the way in which they've been moving these last few weeks has really revealed for millions of people the fact that their interests and the interests of the people are antagonistic and contradictory. And that process is what we need to be building on as we access and deal with this electoral arena. So as I close, let me just say this. We know that the African petty bourgeoisie may be one of the most corrupt classes on the planet. And we remember that our dear revolutionary theorist, Amilcar Cabral, also talked about the absolute necessity for the petty bourgeoisie to commit what he calls class suicide. But we have to be very careful. We cannot have any romantic illusions about any of this. Again, we have to be grounded materially. And if we attempt to project into the contemporary moment that call for the petty bourgeoisie in this context, at this moment, to commit class suicide, and for us to spend an inordinate amount of time trying to win that element over to revolution, that is a mistake. That basically, as we said, these This element has its own objective class interests, and they are more than willing to advance those class interests. Plus, to spend time trying to win that element over to revolution is a betrayal. It diverts us from the real energy that we have to have in terms of building the base among the African working class here in this country, and really globally. So we say there can be no class suicide, that basically that element, that African petty bourgeoisie, if they align themselves with the power of the bourgeoisie, if they associate and see themselves as part of that process, if they align themselves with the enemy, then for us, we have to say they are the enemy and deal with them accordingly. Uhuru.
Uhuru. Okay, well,
Poor brother Ajamu.
Uhuru.
Uhuru. Could I just go on? Because I see I'm the next panel.
Do you hear Elikia?
Yes, I'll just, I see that.
Go ahead. Go
Back
ahead.
at the next panelist. Well, everyone, again, my name is Leesa Dayvus. I want to thank everybody who has spoken before me, the chairman and Brother Ajamu, for their very important and truthful perspectives. And I think Brother Ajamu really hit on something that is so strong, and that is the process of Black people, African people becoming Americanized and American, and what that means. It's like, at what cost do we do this? How much more must we lose about who we are? And I'm not just talking this to be talking this, because it is important. As we can clearly see throughout this pandemic, it is important for us to understand that we come from a people with a great history, and a great history in the medical sciences, and it is a history that has a system that is different from this one. Our systems respected the synergistic relationships between humanity and the earth. Our systems of healing understood and appreciated that, somehow life appeared on this earth without any help from man, and that the earth sustained life. Our systems had a respect and understanding of that process. But as we can see here, the system of colonialist medicine, what they call science, doesn't respect that process at all. We can surely see that in the way that no one is talking about nutrition. No one is even saying you take one vitamin to help through this pandemic, and the numbers are really revealing that. I want to talk about something that we all need to be talking about throughout this pandemic. And I want to talk about this term called gain of function research. And there have been many ways in which the United States has deliberately experimented on developing biological warfare, chemical warfare on people. And there are many umbrellas under which they do this, but one of these is gain of function research, in which United States scientists literally work on trying to make current diseases more deadly than what they are. And when we talk about this pandemic, we need to know, and this is a fact, this is not me, Leesa Dayvus, just saying this, we need to understand that in 2015, Ralph Barrick, who works with the University of Northern California, published a paper that he and scientists were working on, various scientists, and even scientists from the Wuhan Institute of Virology. They worked on developing a bat coronavirus based on the horseshoe bats in China. And at that time, the thinking was that humans could not directly contract a bat virus, from a bat. That was the thinking up until that time. But they wanted to work on this gain of function research to create a virus that could be directly transmitted to humans, that would be highly contagious, that would be based on the model of SARS. And in the research I was looking at, they also talked about how they looked at the HIV virus, and they published this research. Now, I don't have to sit here and prove, although it looks very, very highly plausible and likely that this current pandemic probably is the result of the research they have been doing. And I know that there were some scientists who spoke out against it at that time and said, all you've managed to do is create a virus that could turn into a pandemic for humans. Now, again, whether this pandemic is the direct result of that research, I can't 100% prove, but I shouldn't have to. The very fact that they do this research is something that people in the United States and all over the world need to be saying enough is enough. We need to be really organizing against this. They are also doing research to make Ebola airborne, literally, to make it airborne. And 2009, just some other examples of how they do this kind of research. In 2009, there were 3 mice that had the bubonic plague that escaped from 3 different cages into the city of Newark. This was at what was then called the University of Medicine and Dentistry of New Jersey. So those were living mice, 3 living mice from 3 separate cages with the bubonic plague somehow escaped. Now, it's one thing when you have living mice that can escape, but when you have dead mice that also manage to escape, because several years later, dead mice from that same institution somehow turned up missing. And this is the system of medication. This is the system of medical science that this country is based upon. And we have to come to terms with that. We have to recognize that. And we currently see right now that what is going on in this country in terms of what they are about to put forward and what they are calling an election, which personally makes me want to say, I don't want nothing to do with this any longer. I mean, I long ago said I'm never going to just vote for the Democrat again. This was after the Clinton election, because I could clearly see that they were abusing our people. They were using us, they were giving us nothing, and they weren't even talking or acting like they had to even talk about our needs. And I clearly saw that with the Clinton campaign, and I said, I'm no longer ever going to just vote for the Democrat, because my ancestors did not, neither did our ancestors, die so that we can just be used by any political party. It was supposed to be about voting so that we could get some kind of empowerment, not to just follow a party. And right now, it seems to me the biggest beneficiaries of the struggles of our African people who fought so hard so that we could participate in electoral politics is the Democratic Party. And I don't think that's why they died. I don't think that's why they were killed, so that the Democratic Party could just take advantage of African people and that we continue to show them loyalty. And I just don't see it in terms of having to vote one way or the other, like either the Democrat or the Republican Party. I don't see it like that. And so I haven't voted like that. But when I see this spectacle that is being put before us, it makes me just want to say, why am I going to even make any kind of pretense for this? And I see that so many of our people are just going to follow that, and they're going to follow a human being, a person who was against Medicare for all, still is from what I understand, who wrote the crime bill, who's pro-war, and now on top of it, he cannot even utter a coherent sentence because he is obviously suffering from some kind of issue pertaining to mental health. And so we now see that the Democratic Party is about to make a farce of mental health, which is nothing to be laughed at. It is nothing that should be used in that way. But as we can clearly see, it is about. And so now we have a situation which I think is just even more unbearable and intolerable than what we had before. But I just wanted to bring out those couple of points because that is very, very important that we understand this in terms of what is going on with this so-called health system and some things that we need to definitely talk about. And we also need to understand that during that time while the United States was definitely doing and investigating in all kinds of ways to create diseases, to make them more deadly, that when we look at what was going on with their so-called system of healthcare, they were completely gutting it out. I know that in New Jersey in the last 20 years or so, 26 hospitals have been closed, at least 4 or 5 of them within a 20-mile radius and in the urban communities, but all throughout the state of New Jersey, hospitals have been closed. Throughout this country, there has been tremendous a large amount of hospitals who have been closed throughout this country. And from what I understand, in rural communities, there are now a lot of rural communities that don't even have hospitals. We see that this governor in New York, basically on the fact that I guess he can speak better than Trump does, you know, that's basically what these electoral politics are coming down to, who can properly conjugate a verb, you know, literally. That's what it's coming down to. But we see that Cuomo has been in the press every single day, and now people are talking about, oh, he should be running for the presidency. And yet, when we look at his politics, right now, as New York City or New York State is the epicenter of this pandemic, and as we are hearing about that the Black community is bearing the brunt of this pandemic, and we know that the governor's brother also has been, he has contracted this disease, but yet his circumstances are completely different from most Black people's circumstances and a whole lot of poor people as well. So this governor, as we are going through this, he is still putting forward an austerity budget in which at least $300 million will be gutted from Medicare. How can you even talk about that? He's not talking about taxing the rich. He's not talking about taxing corporations. He's talking about taking it even more from the people. From what I understand, they're seeking to reverse maybe some of the gains that have been going on with trying to stop pre-trial detention. Pre-trial detention is about putting people in prison without a trial, without even proof, without even going through the farce, well, I won't say the farce, but without even going through the illusion of trying to say, well, you know what, you're innocent until proven guilty, so therefore you should not be imprisoned. But he's reversing that. And I see that so many of our people, it seems like, are going to go for that. And, you know, we just cannot continue to do that. We have to come up with a stronger and much better way. To just capitulate is not working for us. It never has. Voting for the lesser of two evils is still voting for evil. And even though the Democratic Party certainly had a whole lot of issues during the time of King, you know, and that's when I guess any of the gains or the things that the Democratic Party did that they became symbolically known for happened during the time of FDR and I guess King. But those Democrats have been dead a long time. They've been dead a very long time. And the only thing that continues to happen is that you just continue to become more dead. And that you're going to have to even try to ride the backs of any political person. I think that there should definitely be time limits on that. And I think 50 years, it means that time is up on that. You can't even, you have no right to even try to associate with anything that would maybe did a little bit more for anybody. You can no longer do that. You can no longer do that. And we should not allow that. Not that we ever should have, but we certainly should not have allowed that. I want to talk about point number 14 briefly of the Black is Back 19-point National Black Political Agenda, which is the call for free, universal, quality health care for all. And we are talking about a public system of healthcare that serves the needs of the entire community as well as individuals. And we recognize that group health outcomes are closely linked to group political and economic status. And we can clearly see that playing out in this current pandemic. We say that quality universal healthcare is an inalienable right for all human beings. And just some of the points, I won't go into all of it, but some of the points that we talk about is we also want a preventative healthcare model whereby more focus is placed on prevention and whereby nutrition and nutritional supplementations and natural non-invasive modalities are also covered under this kind of healthcare plan. Now, yesterday I briefly quoted some numbers, which I'm going to quote again because I think that there are stories in numbers. I think they can lead to important information. It can certainly help us to begin to look at how we should be looking at this. I know the United States is calling this a global pandemic, and of course, anybody dying anywhere from this, it's serious and should never be dismissed or downplayed, but we need more information about this. And just briefly, I wrote down some numbers, but roughly, for example, the primary number of deaths right now stands for Europe, 74,000 people currently are dead. It's about 100 and something thousand people who are globally who have died from this virus, from this pandemic. But Europe, the numbers are 74,000. In the United States, the numbers are 21,000. And in Asia, the numbers are 10,829 approximately. And I primarily use these 3 areas because these are the areas that were hit the hardest so far with this pandemic. But those numbers tell a completely different story about what is happening. Again, Asia is China has over 1 billion people, and yet the numbers for what happened in China nowhere near at all resemble what is going on in the United States. So it doesn't serve us any purpose to just talk about this in general terms as a global pandemic. It's not helping us. Even if we look at what's going on in the United States with 21,000 people who have died so far, over 20,000 people who have died. If we look at the numbers on North America, the numbers in Canada are radically different. And I want to look into that myself because the numbers in Canada are much lower and then the numbers in Mexico are also much lower. We know that we had a situation where with some arrogant, pathological, savage European scientists or whatever in France literally was talking about how they want to take this vaccine and take it over into Africa because, they need to now, we need to experiment on them and all this kind of stuff where they don't have any standing. We have to clearly understand right now that neither the United States nor Europe, they don't have any standing in being able to tell us how we should be approaching things medicinally. They don't have any standing. And I think this reflects how they define healthcare because France has about 14,000 people who have died from this, Europe 74,000, and on the continent of Africa, there's only 750 people who are recorded as having died from this pandemic. So what on earth do Africans have in any kind of way? How can they benefit by listening to any kind of countries whose numbers are like this, and especially considering their approach to this? And I want to talk a moment again about how China approached this because the United States is not doing this. And China, like I said, took an all hands on deck approach. They talked about nutrition. They make it a part of their policy. People high up in their government talk about traditional Chinese medications, and they said they are going to work with that. They will work with traditional Chinese medicine, which is often referred to as TCM. So if you see that, pay attention to that. They're working with the vitamins. They're working with Cuba. They said they'll work with all countries. Cuba has a medication right now that seems to have the best record of success for dealing with this pandemic, and it is called interferon alpha 2B. So China implemented all of these strategies, and now they're trying to say, well, they're probably lying about their numbers, but if you look at all of Asia, they also reflect the trajectory that the pandemic that happened with the pandemic in Asia, but it's a completely different trajectory in the United States and in Europe, and we need to understand that, and we need to be prepared to ask why. And when we look at the United States approach to this pandemic, basically the approach is stay away from germs and die until we can create a vaccine, and that is exactly what they are saying. I looked at
That is time.
Okay, well, thank you. I think I got it all in what I wanted to say.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Leesa Dayvus. Leesa Dayvus is a longtime strong community activist from New Jersey who has been passionately committed to the Black liberation struggle for over 30 years. She's a member of the People Organization for Progress, the vice chair of the Black is Back Coalition, and chair of the Healthcare Working Group. Leesa, I strongly agree with you. I believe that this virus has gone airborne now, and we really appreciate you. You did a tremendous job. Thank you, thank you, thank you. That was really, really a blessing. Now it's time for the one and only Chairman Omali Yeshitela. Is the founder and chairman of the American People's Socialist Party and chair of the Black is Back Coalition. He is the leader of the Uhuru movement and chairman of the African Socialist International. He is also the founder of the Burning Spear newspaper and author of several books, including An Uneasy Equivocal, The African Revolution Burst, Parasites, Capitalism, and the Vanguard and the Advanced Detachment of the American People. And he is our chairman. I love him dearly and have a lot of respect for him. And he's going to take us to a whole different level. Thank you so much.
Uhuru, I want to thank you, Reverend Pinckney, and you can pick up the check the next meeting.
No, you better use your credit card.
Right on. Yeah. Thank you so much. And I want to just express appreciation to all of the presenters, to Comrade Ajamu and Comrade Sister Leesa Dayvus. This is a really important discussion that we're having. And I just want to make a couple of points. One, that there is nothing defensible about capitalism, that it has no redeeming qualities at all. It has to go. That the Africans cannot coexist with this social system. And that two, the capitalist system itself has its origin in the slave trade, in enslaving Black people. This is where the whole thing got cranked up, because up until just the years 1347, 1351, half the white people in the world died of plague. And that plague and subsequent plagues in Europe lasted 100 years or more, and Europe rescued itself through the slave trade. You cannot have a successful economy if half the people die in 4 years. There's no way in hell you can have anything that approximates a successful economy. Look it up. They call it the Black Plague. And it may have been more than half the people. At one time they said it was a third, but it was an incredible, then they said half, but at least half the people in Europe died of that plague. And that had a devastating impact on Europe. Now, when we talk about Europe, it's really important to understand that the Europe that we're talking about now didn't exist. What existed was these groups of warring tribes all over this place that we now call Europe. And they identified themselves primarily in relationship to each other. They defined themselves primarily in relationship to each other. The Goths, the Celts, the Normans, all of these, and they were in a state of permanent warfare, etc. And what changed that was slavery, was when Europe left starving, unfree Europe, because you've got to remember, they lived under a feudal system, which meant that the average white person had nothing. They were tied to the land of the landlords, etc. And what rescued them when Europe went out of Europe into Africa in particular, and began this process of kidnapping Black people some 600 years ago. Portugal did that. This is the process that started bringing the wealth, Cam, you know about it. It brought the wealth to Europe. This is where the whole capitalist system gets born out of this process, and then out of the process of going through what we now call the Americas. But even what we identify as the Americas got defined, came into existence through the slave trade. It was slavery that was the basis for the colonization of all of this area that we now know as the Americas. So here's the capitalist system born from that. Has no redeeming qualities. This notion about a couple of white guys making hats, then they formed the guild, and then they made hats, and then they got better at it. That's no. What brought capitalism into existence was selling Black people and taking land and resources from Africans, from Asia, from particularly in the Americas, etc. So the whole thing rests upon that foundation. Karl Marx once said, he said something to the effect that what he called wage slavery, which is an interesting term. I mean, if you got a job, wage slavery in Europe, he said, required as a pedestal, slavery pure and simple in the New World. That was what they did to us. So he's saying the whole capitalist system rests upon a foundation of slavery, which can be translated to colonialism that we experience today and all other peoples around the world. Their structures what came out of that. Economic and political structures came from this process. And this is what we're looking at today. When we're talking about an election here, an election in France, we're talking about white men sitting up on national television in France, saying that we can cure this disease by creating a vaccine, by going into Africa and testing Africans for this vaccine, just like we did with AIDS with African prostitutes. This is what he said. You're talking about a France that whole economy was built on Black people. Haiti fed France for I don't know how long. And then right now, France controls something like 14 different states, the economy of 14 different states, looting them on a regular basis. The whole world economy, the entire world economy rests upon a foundation of stolen Black labor, and also what was produced in the places that labor was productive in Africa and in certain parts of the Americas. It's really important to understand that. If you don't understand that capitalism was born parasitic, V.I. Lenin talked about how imperialism represented the highest stage of capitalism once it had become parasitic. We're saying that capitalism was born parasitic. Slavery is parasitic. Colonialism is parasitic. Killing and stealing resources of the indigenous people, parasitic. Capitalism was born as a parasite on the body of humanity. And what is happening now is that parasite is being starved. The host is resisting the parasite, causing serious problems for it. And that's reflected in what we see in the politics all around the world, and certainly in this country. So when we look at the process of capitalism and imposed enslavement of African people, colonial enslavement of African people in this country, and we have never not resisted. We have always resisted having this terror, this white nationalist terror imposed on us. Up until now, there was no such thing. Up until recently, until the 14th century, there was no such thing as Europe or Europeans. European was born out of the process of slavery. And this is the time where instead of identifying and defining themselves primarily in relationship to each other, they began to define themselves primarily in relationship to us and the rest of the world. This is a whole concept, whether you see the emergence of a sense of sameness among white people that rests upon an economic base that we recognize as nationalism. The white nation was born as a consequence of enslaving African people, and the sense of sameness that gave it a conscious, subjective component came from that process as well. And so now you got Black people and other peoples around the world tied to this whole capitalist monster at this time headquartered in the United States. Up until the 1945 or so, it was headquartered in England. The world economic system, monetary system was located in England. As a consequence of that war, where the United States came out on top of that war, it now dominates the world. And with Bretton Woods and these other processes that initiated IMF, World Bank, et cetera, the world economy centered in the United States. It's the top dog now. And so it has run things. And from this time, it created what people refer to as the Atlanticist group. This is what has defined how the world economy would occur, period. And it's been done with guns. NATO is a part of it. The United Nations is a part of it. The trade, World Trade Organization, the various kind of trade relationships came from that. Trump gets elected. He gets elected in a process, like everybody, where that is a nonviolent contest between sectors of the ruling class for control of the state. That's what an election is. An election is, in fact, an instrument of capitalist, of state power, no matter where it is. And so you have this contest for control of the state. It's nonviolent. If it weren't for the elections, then what would happen is the capitalists would just have their bandits go out and just shoot people and see who is going to control everything. That's what happens in certain parts of the world because they haven't developed this kind of sophisticated system now. So that's why you see 17 people running for the office. They got 17 different sectors of capital paying them off to represent their interests. They don't represent our interests. That's why you saw Obama with $1 billion of campaign. You think he represents Black people? He represented the Wall Street and those people who gave him that money. That's the contest between different sectors of the bourgeoisie for control of the state. And so now with Trump, he disrupts the entire operation because he did not start off anyway being funded by any of the other bosses. He funded himself. And they took him for a joke for a long period of time. And he was able to get enough traction because he spoke directly to a base of white people, white nationalist people, which is to say white people. And as a consequence of that, it was very, very difficult for them to get rid of him, which is why you've seen, though, this contest with Trump from all sectors of the bourgeoisie since he's been in power. There hasn't been a single day since Trump was elected where he was not attacked by the bourgeois media. Wall Street Journal even, all of them attacking Trump, 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 Trump. And then that's also the reason why you see Russia, 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 because Trump violated the whole principles of the Atlanticist arrangement, because the Atlanticist arrangement was organized in part to contain Russia, or the Soviet Union. And so the Soviet Union was the contender for power, and now Russia is a contender of power. And so sectors of the bourgeoisie, and Trump is opening the door to Russia, and now everything is Russia, even you. So that if you come out and talk like you're talking today, the bourgeoisie has already said that you're not saying this. This is a Russian thing that's saying this for you, that black people, this is Russia trying to divide the American people and upset our democracy. That's what they're saying on a regular basis. You'll see them say that. And China is a major contender in this thing today also. And so China is magnificent. I love it. I don't love it because I love the Chinese system or anything like that. I love it because what China has done is disrupt this whole comfortable thing that has existed among white people. They created a revolution in 1949 that allowed them to consolidate the Chinese nation and put forth a program in the interest of China. I want to just say this. I don't have much time. I want to just say this because we reference this, some things moving forward. A political party is the representative of a particular class. It is a class organization. Whether it's the Democratic Party, people talk about duopoly, you can call it whatever opoly you want to. If you're a Democratic Party, the Republican Party, they represent the bourgeoisie, white power, in different faces. Just like a cop comes in and speaks nice to you, and then the other cop comes in and treats you badly, good cop, bad cop, they still cops. And they still want to put you in jail. And that's the what we are looking at now is a political party is a representative of a particular class, one. And that it is the advanced sector of those populations that come into existing and create political parties that speak to their interests. When we talk about a political party, we talk about the struggle we are engaged in, we have to be talking about a struggle to take power. If we're not talking about taking power, that's not on the top of your agenda, then it's just wasting time. You're just spinning wheels. The question has to be the taking power, and then the question, what class do you represent? We say the African working class has to ascend to the position of the ruling class. In order to do that, it's got to crush the power of the bourgeoisie and the colonial bourgeoisie. You can't do it otherwise. So that's what the part of this agenda was on yesterday when Comrade Diop was talking about black community control of the police. We ain't talking about trying to put the police in the community. We're talking about negating the police that's functioned in the interest of the colonial powers and having securing a capacity of our own, independent, selfishly independent of them and representing us as a people. Right now, this system is in trouble. It's in profound, deep trouble. And that's why we have to move in a very determined and organized fashion. The economy has dropped, has in free fall. Something, maybe 17 million people just overnight almost unemployed. If they're unemployed, that means shops are closing down. That means they can't buy anything. If they can't go shop from Walmart, who, by the way, has been cushioned with a part of the trillions of dollars that they're giving to these big corporations. But if they can't shop there, nobody can buy a refrigerator. If they can't buy a refrigerator, then the refrigerator joints are in trouble. If the refrigerator joints are in trouble, then people can't be hired. The economy is in a state of free fall right now. And so what we often end up doing is begging the white people to make the economy better. Part of what we should be doing is taking advantage of this because increasingly, people are out there on their own trying to solve their problem. You see people now open for discussions about this system that you haven't seen before. You see people trying to solve their own problems. And that's what we have to intervene in this discussion, in this argument, and say that the system is the enemy of the people. Even if you do some kind of reformist stuff, the consequences cannot be reformism. You do reformist stuff as a stepping stone to make the revolution. You have to have that as the top of the agenda. That's what we have to do. That's what we have to develop right now in our community, in our movement. So you got an economy in free fall. and it is. And all you got to do is get the Wall Street Journal if it can come out now, because increasingly when you can get to the supermarket, you see the newspapers aren't there. And what the hell has happened? The whole thing is experiencing profound distress, and the people want leadership. And that's what we try to provide on the ground, where the people are providing the leadership. And that means it's dangerous sometimes. It's dangerous when we go out and put up posters and pass out flyers in our own community, but the community needs to hear from us. We are the ones that should be listening, not looking at Trump every damn morning, to be listening to us. They believe us because we live with them. He said, well, it's dangerous. Yes, it's dangerous, but it's no more dangerous than what we did in Mississippi. Ask Werner, Goodman, and Cheney how dangerous it was. Ask how many of us who went and did voter education in the face of these crackers who would kill us on sight. So what I'm saying is, yes, there's danger, but that's what being the advanced attachment is, because every political party is representative of an advanced sector of that community that it represents. And so that's what we have to understand and recognize. And so, and boldly move forward. And the rulers are scared. The bourgeoisie is scared right now. It's scared. It's scared because of what's happening to the economy. It's scared because of what you might do, because you might come out of your house masked, this time wearing a mask for a different reason, to try to do something. And that's why you see how fragile the whole system is. They can't stand the discussion. That's why Facebook's now shutting it down. You can't say anything now. Facebook shut it down. The Russians said this, they are afraid of us. And that means we have to deepen our organizational capacity and understand that this election, and we can raise critical questions with this election, but they got to be revolutionary questions, or at least questions that contribute to the emergence of a revolutionary capacity. So, Uhuru.
Uhuru.
I think I got it in.
Very good. That is the one and only chairman, O'Talley. We love you, and I just think that it was very enlightening, and I strongly agree with you, because they are afraid of what we might do. You know, like I said, we might come out of our homes now with a different type of mask on, but that is the one and only. But I got to turn it over to my my co-host, and she will take it from here. Thank you.
Uhuru. Uhuru, thank you. Reverend Pinckney, thank you to our presenters, Brother Ajamu Baraka, Sister Leesa Dayvus, and Chairman Omali Yeshitela, for your presentations. We are now at the time for a live Q&A. And I do want to announce, for those who are participating on Zoom, we have about 90 people with us on Zoom right now. Email your questions to info@blackisbackcoalition.org. info@blackisbackcoalition.org. We have 25 minutes set for this Q&A. The first 10 minutes will be for the presenters, also any other panelists that we have established, so our other steering committee members, to ask questions and to discuss amongst one another. And then the other 15 minutes is for answers that come from the audience. Should not enough questions come in, then we can prolong, you know, how long you guys discuss among each other. So right now we do have 10 minutes for any of our panelists to ask Chairman Leesa Dayvus or Ajamu Baraka questions, and you three can also, you know, talk amongst each other as well. Uhuru.
Uhuru.
Mic open.
Uhuru, this is Jihad. Can you hear me?
Oh, yes, come on. Yeah. Well,
Yes,
that's
indeed.
just the panelists first, I think, Brother Jihad, isn't it? Or is it not?
Yeah, it can be the panelists. Let's do the panelists.
Well, don't do it the way you said it. No, if it's
okay.
some other way, that's all right. Let me
I
back
said
up.
any of you,
Yeah.
any of you that are established like up as the steering committee, and then the audience. So yes, you can go, Brother Jihad.
Uhuru, Brother Jihad.
Okay. I didn't. Okay, I was trying to understand. So, you know what? Listening to the three of y'all, I got goosebumps. You know that, right? But it's so powerful, and my concern is my concern is how do we get a bigger mic? And right now, you know, here we are, April 12th, 2020, and just being in the community, like you said, you know, instead of turning on every morning, listen to Donald Trump, you know, we should be out there, you know. But as profound as we are with the organizations in Black is Black Coalition, you know, and what you said yesterday, which kind of really lingered in my mind, there's so many good players on the field, organizationally and individually, doing so many revolutionary things. But how can we be less incoherent and disorganized? And how can we get a bigger mic to because elections around the corner. So here we go into another cycle. And what's going to be different, and what could be different and more intense than what we've been doing?
Uhuru.
Uhuru.
Come at Brother Jihad. It's an interesting question coming from you, of all people. Mm-hmm. Because the truth is that the people don't automatically come to certain conclusions. For example, the people don't automatically, it's the advanced detachment has a responsibility to win the people to a better understanding. Every community has that. White people don't just come to conclusion. They're advanced attachments. Sometimes they're Republicans and stuff. They get information all the time saying, this is what you ought to believe. This is how you ought to think about it. I mentioned you in particular, Comrade Jihad, because that's what Emory Douglas and the Black Panther newspaper and all those people walking in those communities, doing the work in the community among the masses of people. That's why the Black Panther Party at one juncture was able to characterize itself as the vanguard, not because it was bestowed on them by any other force, but because of the work they did. And some of us are right now in the communities, and we are limited just in terms of the numbers that we have, but this is where we have to grow from. So this is what we have to do. This is how the mic is expanded by the work that we do actually in these communities, organizing among our people, and then of course using as many of the instruments that are available to us and through technology that's close to the ground. Because as we've said, you know, that Facebook, all these other, and even this, we will see that we're using now is going to be shut down for us. So it's on the ground. It's what we do on the ground. That's going to be the fundamental thing that will make the difference for us. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that's what's going to help Africans be Africans, because we on the ground, because we're doing the work. And we're not just saying be Africans, we're creating institutions, we are mobilizing people, fighting against white power, et cetera, and bringing people into political life in that fashion and political organization.
Right. Uhuru. Uhuru. This is Leesa. I just want to tell you about some things that we're doing in terms of getting the word out about how our people can directly fight against the virus in and of itself and how we can protect ourselves. And Sister Dr. Aisha Fields, who was with us yesterday, I know she's the director of APDAP, and they have been putting out a lot of information on the ground and posters and things of that nature. And I've been working with people in New Jersey. And we've been trying to hold meetings, you know, electronically and via phone and texting and everything. And some people directly asked about some of the information that APDAC was using and how they could also use some of that information. And when I talked with Sister Dr. Fields, she had emailed me some information about how they're doing that. And I'm going to certainly look into that. I know that if you go to their website, I don't remember the current name of their website, but you'll see some information about that. Within the Black is Back Coalition, we are also working on getting the website up too with as much information as possible. Yesterday, for those who are not on the call, who weren't on the call yesterday, we did put out, develop some various home remedies is what I'm gonna call them, but things that we can just eat, certain kind of foods we can be eating, certain kind of things we can be doing. We also looked at the protocols from China that they had published, how they're talking about using vitamin C. Our people can take that and can use that. And that information is going to be published. So I just want people to know that they'll be able to get it and look at all the kind of things and the kind of toolkits that they can prepare so we can fight back, because we do not need this government. Who we need is each other.
Oh,
Ralph here.
Sister Belinda. Oh, okay.
Oh, we got a moderator, right? Well, hold on. Go ahead, Sister Belinda, the moderator, our moderator.
Okay, great. All right. Chairman Omali, thank you so much for that awesome piece of education and knowledge in regards to where we at and where we need to go. I just want to, voice my concern, and maybe you can formulate it into a question. My concern is that when after this thing is all said and done, or perhaps over, I know for a fact I don't think things are going to be as usual. This is, we're not going to get back to the normal. This is an opportunity for us to seize and make the changes that the people really need to see. As Black people, we have been left out, kicked out, knocked out, and they have, put their foots on our neck for so long that we have fallen for so many tricks and traps, and I call it the okie doke. So as Black people, what can we do now to seize this opportunity for a Black agenda that would not put us back in the state and condition that we have presently been in?
Oh, hold on. Somebody was going to say something. Let me back off.
Ajamu.
Yes, comrade.
Let me just say something very short, and others can follow up to that very, very important comment and question. Sister Belinda is absolutely correct. There is no going back to the so-called normal. We've already talked about yesterday that for us, going back to the normal is a continuation of our suffering. But objectively, what we see unfolding now is that in essence, the capitalist order has basically collapsed. There's going to be a continued massive unemployment. The capitalists are taking advantage of this moment to share themselves of workers. They have identified that one way in which they're going to be able to maintain and expand production or productivity is through more aggressive automation, which means more, of course, unemployment. And what we see for ourselves as a consequence is that even though they talk about us being so-called essential workers, those categories are going to be reduced over the next few weeks. And because of the fact that the contradictions of this capitalist order are only going to intensify, what it poses for us is the absolute necessity on the part of the state to engage in more effective repression. The use of violence and repression against the millions of us who are going to be in desperate straits. So, V.R. Lenin said once that, decades can go by and nothing happens. And then you have weeks that go by and decades happen. The conditions of 6 weeks ago are profoundly different than today. We are entering which could be a pre-revolutionary moment.
Wow.
And we need to be preparing our forces for that. So there's no going back to the norm, because basically the contradiction of this capitalist order is such that they know they can't go back to the norm. They're going to be relying more on repression, and that's why they are conditioning the population to accept these draconian shelter-in-place kinds of policies. That's part of the process that we need to be preparing ourselves for the intensification of the war that we are involved in.
Hold on. Yeah, I agree with what the comrade was just saying. And what you said, Comrade Sister Belinda, there ain't no going back. And the norm, as bad as it was, is not something that we're going to return to. The capitalist colonialist state never, ever easily or voluntarily gives back the democratic space that it takes from the people. Any democratic space that it takes, it intends to keep it. And given the crisis of imperialism today, as the economy is in a state of free fall, I think Comrade Ajamu is absolutely correct. They're going to be automating as much as they can. And then you're also going to see a greater concentration of capital as small businesses are dropping out of it, being destroyed, and then trillions of dollars being given to the big corporations. You're going to see them gobbling them all up, and just a greater concentration of capital, greater unemployment, greater mistreatment of the people because they have the ability to do that. So I think that's absolutely true. And what I believe and what my party believes is that we have to be preparing to govern. I mean, all this stuff is just messing around with them forever and ever and ever. I mean, institutionalize the capacity to make stuff happen in various communities, not just here. I mean, we are on the ground, like in places like Folkville and Everton West, in the townships in South Africa, on the ground. I mean, doing the same things that we're talking about doing now, helping the people, on the ground with things like distancing and masks and all of that. The government doesn't do it, but the government is doing is beating people. It's using repression. It comes out, beat people. And the report we got is that the government of South Africa have killed more people to keep them quarantined than the disease has killed people in South Africa. So that's just South Africa. I mentioned South Africa, but it's happening everywhere. We have to grow a capacity to govern. And that's what the institutions that we are creating are all about. Food, to make food happen, we have to grow food and do other things like that. And the people are open, and the revolution, a pre-revolutionary period may very well be upon us, as Comrade Ajamu has suggested, because the people are being driven into greater desperation. The question is whether or not we're on the ground to provide the organization, to provide the ideology, because to make revolution, it's not good enough just to have crisis. It's not good enough just to have a ruling class that can't rule in the same old way, though that's critical. Another factor has to be the willingness of the people to do anything in order to be free. Like you've seen children in Palestine go up against Israeli tanks with rocks, and same thing in South Africa. But also what is absolutely necessary is to have a revolutionary party guided by revolutionary theory. These are the factors. I'm talking about making revolution. Our people have to be prepared to take power. At least we have to have leadership that's talking about taking power, actually preparing to govern. And that means negating the influence of the ruling class. That's why it was so important. Listen to Diop and listen to all the other forces here who are talking about how do we institutionalize our own capacity for self-rule, for self-sufficiency. Uhuru.
Uhuru, Uhuru, Uhuru. We are now at the time to get questions from the audience. So our first question.
Excuse me, Brother Ralph has been trying to get on for 3 speakers now.
Okay, I know. Usually Sister Betty is trying to get Brother Ralph to shut up. And now if she says he's trying to get on, let him on.
Brother Ralph, please come closer to the mic because we can't actually hear it. So.
All right, one other thing, wonderful presentation. I don't believe I'm going to see this on CNN tomorrow, but one of the important things that we must do to advance ourselves is what we are doing is educating ourselves. And if I may add to the historical perspective of what Brother Ajamu Baraka presented as to how we got to the place of the misleadership class, the petty bourgeoisie. Well, if we go back into the 50s and the 60s, those who had helped us to register voters, to present ourselves culturally against the hanging of people in the South, those who were our supporters at the time, the Communist Party decided that it was too early to work on the analysis of the class structure within the Black community. And so on both sides, we had economic support for the petty bourgeoisie class, and we had political support by our side, that the party that had helped us, and having helped us, they were able to influence us when those of us who said we must analyze the Black community ourselves, the class structure within the Black communities, and our friends said it's too soon. Well, here we are. You know, the carrot and the stick. They used it, they got us, and if we understand that, then we understand that I think in Zimbabwe, when they said none but ourselves, we have to analyze our position, even though those who have been so-called the vanguard of their movement are not necessarily the vanguard of our movement. And so this program, I think, helps us analyze where we are, and having understood those issues, we are in better position to come up with plans and programs that will move us forward. Well, thank you for that time.
Uhuru. So our first question comes from Gil, who is based, Comrade Gil, who is based out of New York City. And he asks, he doesn't specify who, but he says, how do we organize and mobilize the revolutionary potential during this period?
This is Leesa, I'll start. And again, everything that I think of as of this point always focuses on in terms of what's happening with this pandemic and how can we organize around it. And of course, that can build the revolutionary organizing as well. But I'm going to talk about a couple of things specifically that we can begin to do right now. The FDA has the approval of its own. It does not need any more things to happen from Congress in order to be able to allow the medications that Cuba is currently using, that other countries like China and even Germany is using, Italy is using, to begin to allow that medication, all, you know, the medicines that they've been working with, interferon alpha 2B, as in the number 2 and the letter B, is one of them. And the FDA has in its power, always did, the ability to be able to review that medication and to say that, yes, they're going to allow it to be used. They have refused to do that. But there is currently a petition online that I saw going around that is going directly to the FDA to say you must, you know, approve this medication, you must review it. We can certainly get people to do that, because it's clear that what the United States is doing, they're not looking out for us, and they're basically leaving us to die. So we can begin to do that ourselves. I know I'm in the process of working on a letter in conjunction with the People's Organization for Progress and the Black is Back Healthcare Working Group and Black is Back, to send a letter directly to the FDA condemning their actions and demanding that they review this medication and that they allow it to be used in the United States. That's one thing people can do. I know there's also a petition, and perhaps Brother Ralph and Sister Betty will speak to this as well, where they are demanding to allow Cuba's medical brigade to come in. We can also, provides an opportunity that we should be looking at sanctions as well, because the sanctions that the United States insists upon implementing, insist upon during these times, continuing to call for even more sanctions, that needs to be condemned. We need to say no, like what they're doing to Iran, how they're upping the sanctions with Venezuela, how they are even continuing to allow them to happen. And so this provides a way where we can hear and see the necessity of stopping these sanctions and the impact that they have on people's lives. Because I know at some point that China did a big shipment of all these medical supplies to the United States when we were screaming for them. Now just think about this, suppose we were not able to get those medical supplies because there were sanctions on this country. So those are just some of the things and some of the ways we can begin to do things now.
Uhuru, thank you. I do want us to keep our answers short. We have some good questions coming in, so we want to get them in. This question, Chairman, I think you can answer this. It says, I found some that I've spoken with are looking for an example of socialism in application and not just the theory. Are there any countries, either now or in the past, that we can point to as an example of socialism for our people? That comes from Brother Nasir, who also tuned in yesterday, and he's watching from Kuwait. We have to unmute the chairman.
He's muted. We can't hear you, Chairman, if you're talking.
There's been some controversy around this question, but I will speak to this from my perspective and from the perspective of our party. That there have been instances where socialists have seized power. The Soviet Union, that happened. China, that happened. Cuba, that happened. And a few other places. But I don't see that as socialism. I'm saying that the material basis for the advent of socialism has not yet materialized, while the political conditions for socialists to seize power did occur. And socialists were able to seize power in Russia. And socialists were able to seize power in China and in Cuba and some other places. And so that's what I'm saying. And so I cannot show you this. And even anybody who studied it, recognize that even Lenin and the Bolsheviks, recognize that the socialist revolution could not happen in one place like that, that they expected Germany and other places to make the revolution because what you had was trying to have a socialist economy, an island of socialism in a sea of capitalist rapacity, and it just doesn't work that way. So I can't point to you about how it has occurred socialism, but I can tell you that Cuba is a magnificent example of socialists having power. And you see with Cuba, like how many, 20,000 doctors they've sent around the world just to deal with this pandemic. And the stuff that they've done other places. I mean, Asada is in Cuba. And so we've seen, good examples of taking care of the people. We even see, like, look at Venezuela. In Venezuela right now, the people don't have to pay rent. Nobody can be fired during this process that people are going.
We can't hear you.
I'm sorry. We've seen this situation where socialists have had power, but I can't point to you an example of unless you want to, characterize that. Somebody saw the rapid development, for example, in Soviet Russia. It was quick development, but you got to remember, Soviet Russia occurred. The Bolsheviks took power in Russia, and at a time where Russia was a semi-feudal state. And that meant that there were severe limitations on ordinary people. Ordinary people couldn't go to school. Ordinary people, the peasants couldn't own land. Ordinary people couldn't be promoted in certain kinds of circumstances. When the Soviets took power, when the Bolsheviks took power, then it opened up all of that. The land that was controlled only by the feudal landlords now were turned over to the masses of people. So you had rapid development. But the problem was it ran into its limitations because the Soviets then were isolated economically in the rest of the world. So they didn't have the advantage of the United States and others who were looting from colonies every place else and flourish. So I can just say that I can point to socialists in power, but I can't show you socialism in action except those examples of what socialists once in power were able to do.
Uhuru. Thank you, Chairman. We have a lot of questions coming in, but we can't take all. But we have one question coming in from Luezi Kinshasa, who is the Secretary General of the African Socialist International, watching us from London. He wants to salute everybody and said this is a great meeting and great presentations. He's saying, what urgent demands should we make outside of the US with the overwhelming deaths of African people caused by the colonial coronavirus to undermine the colonial US government's standing in the world?
Go ahead. That's a critical question. And I think it's being addressed by people here. I think that's what Leesa was just talking about. Yes. In so many ways, how the United States is starving people, is keeping people from having resources that could deal with this. It's exposing itself to tomorrow. That's one of the best things about that we can get from this crisis. I mean, it's one of the many imperialist crises, but this is one of the best things, the exposure that the U.S. is getting, the contradictions that are being made raw. There's a question, for example, from a statement from Sister Ojolari from Esther from Colombia. who appreciates this discussion and wants to talk about, how this thing can only give more fuel to the revolution, and how can we make sure the post-COVID-19 moment of the revolution is a global movement which resonates and articulates throughout the African diaspora beyond national borders. And of course, that's part of what, I've referenced earlier on in my presentation. And that's what Comrade Luezi, who is the Secretary General of the African Socialist International, is talking about. So we have to use this moment to expose the United States in particular, and to try to isolate the United States in the world. So that, because the United States preens talking about Russia this, China this, Venezuela this. And how can it get away with that given what it does to African people here? And how can it get away with that given how it's treating this whole COVID-19 issue and resulting in so many deaths unnecessarily around the world? That's our responsibility, all of us who are part of this movement, and all of us who are listening to this discussion. The United States is the strategic enemy of everybody on the planet Earth. It is the strategic enemy. So no matter whatever we may be fighting, no matter whatever contradiction we may be confronted, the United States is the strategic enemy, and all of us should be making the proper criticisms to undermine its standing in the whole world.
And that let me just jump in real quick, and concretely what that suggests in terms of some strategic demands to strip away the prestige of the U.S. This notion of U.S. exceptionalism is for people around the world to call out the U.S. for its systematic human rights violations regarding the Africans in the U.S. To criticize their inability to safeguard the human rights of Africans and other nationally oppressed people in this country. So we need to take advantage of this ideological moment to exercise that kind of international solidarity, so that we can raise the general awareness of everybody that this is a world system, and that the U.S. is in fact the captain of this criminal system, and that it has now been exposed and is now vulnerable, and we need to take full advantage of that.
Uhuru. Okay, so the audience, I just want to say, is really enjoying this discussion. We have some great questions coming in. I want to get to Comrade Vince Lawrence, who is watching out of Florida. Is it Fort Myers, Florida? Fort Myers, Florida. Okay. He says the subject is called...
His name ain't Vince no more, but that's another story.
Uhuru Nyendu. I'm looking at the email. I'm so critical. In Nyendu. It says, could you speak to anybody? Could you speak to what we should do in light of people, when it's shared, like our discussions, our movement discussions about COVID-19, people talk about, it's 5G, it's the towers, it's radiation, and what he considers to be voodoo logic. How can we address these types of, ideologies or myths that are going around in relationship to the colonial virus?
This is Leesa. I would like to address that, especially with the topic of 5G. And I think that a lot of people are raising some very interesting concerns, although how they are being framed is, somewhat, different. And I think that, we are going through a lot of different things. Our people are going through a lot of different things. They're trying to get answers and to understand information. And for myself personally, I've always appreciated a lot of things that people on the ground are saying, things that they're hearing, because there could be truth in that. In terms of how this is being framed, because I've heard some of the arguments in terms of people saying that, well, 5G has caused this and 5G this and all of that kind of stuff. I don't think those arguments are being framed in a way that's necessarily that helpful, but it doesn't mean to say that we should not be concerned about the potential that not just 5G, but various other forms of electromagnetic pollution poses to humanity. And I just know for the last 20 or so years with my study with energy, medicine, and healing that I had begun to hear about a long time ago in terms of these, the various exposures and the various ways that these various frequencies can affect our bodies. And I do think that that is a very important question, and one way in which we should look at it from that perspective. We don't necessarily have to always say, well, what is the cause of this and because of that? I mean, if we are exposed to certain frequencies, they can help to weaken our immune systems, and they can certainly give a certain potency to other diseases that are going around. So I don't necessarily think they should be discarded, but I think we should look at them in a certain way. And just understand this much too, NASA is very much aware in terms of the impact that these frequencies can have on our body based on when astronauts travel in space and when they're away from the magnetic sphere of the Earth. So.
Uhuru. Okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that everything that's produced in the capitalist system is detrimental. I mean, you will find it has some detrimental stuff. I mean, you know, even when they're promoting medicines you should take, they say, take this medicine, but it's going to kill you, you know, or it's going to cause this other disease that you have. I mean, that's the profit motive there. So, but I don't think that's the question. I think the issue is intentionality. That's what I think this conference is speaking to, the question of intentionality. In fact, I think it is. That's what I'm saying anyway. I'm saying that the U.S. government has an interest in harming China, harming people around the world, is fighting for China for global dominance, and that it has a history of doing horrible things to African people. I mean, that's it. And so I believe that it's possible that 5G is a problem, et cetera. I don't even know enough about it to say that, but I know in terms of intentionality, if you want to see an origin of a contradiction, you can't just look at where it is now. It's important to look at the history of the contradiction you're confronted with, so you can have some sense of what is happening. And I think that as an oppressed people, the question of intentionality is really important to us. So I'm not saying that 5G doesn't do something, but in the context of this question, this discussion now, is the United States government, and we see what the United States government is doing. I mean, the 5G stuff, the Chinese are able to deal with the 5G, whatever the hell you want to cause it, by responding to it as in the way that Carmen's sister Leesa talked about. Vitamin C and other kind of stuff. They got more 5G there probably than any place else in the world. So I'm just saying that I'm not discounting the harm environmentally and otherwise that the imperialists do with anything that they produce. But what I am saying that there's political and economic intentionality that's associated with this struggle that we're involved in, and that's where I approach the question. Uhuru.
That's why it's so important for us to redirect people's attentions to the structural realities, to name the enemy. And for me, the enemy is the pan-European colonial capitalist, white supremacist patriarchy. Name the enemy and then talk about the vision that we must have in order to defeat that enemy and to build a new world. And that is the construction of a new societies and new societies under socialism. And that's how we make this struggle an international one, because it is indeed an international one. Going back to the question the sister Esther raised, that basically, you know, we are an African people. We are a colonized and oppressed African people. African people are oppressed and colonized worldwide, and the majority of collective humanity is oppressed and suffering as a consequence of this global colonial capitalist system. So we have the basis for unity. We have the basis for a new vision, and what we have to do now is build the structures to take advantage of this moment to be able to advance our forces toward victory.
Uhuru, Sister Esther, in terms of building structures, that's something we've been doing now for years. And Comrade Dulueze, who raised the first question about our approach, you know, throughout the African world, is the Secretary General of the African Socialist International and presides. And there is an African Socialist International that's busy at work, not only in this country, but in the Bahamas, that's in South Africa, that's in, you know, Ghana, that's in various other places around the world. I believe you. I agree with you, Sister Esther, that we have to have a capacity to fend for ourselves, not just fend for ourselves, because we suffer, fundamentally the same contradiction, and we have to be able to respond to that contradiction. And we have to have a strategic approach to our struggle from every front that we're located in. We have to develop that capacity. And so I think it's a very important question that you raised, and one that our movement has been struggling with overall for a long time, and certainly since Marcus Garvey, Uhuru.
Uhuru, Chairman, just a quick response to what Brother Ajamu said in the question of the last participant. Can I be heard?
Yes.
The political prisoner movement has always advocated a general strike against forced labor in the prisons. I think it was Richard Williams, one of our European revolutionary allies, who absolutely refused to do any work in the prisons. Currently, according to Jericho, I know Brother Jihad can speak on this better, there are still death camps where they are forcing people to do prison labor. That was a recent, email that went out from Jericho. So the community should be supporting the prison strikes. There are a few prison strikes. I think we were discussing it this morning, especially those like, there should be one in Louisiana, since they have so many corporations that are responsible for forced labor. And Sister Belinda told us yesterday, 4 cents an hour. So definitely there is word of a general strike that people want to have. And I think we ought to start by supporting the political prisoners and the prisoners of economic slavery in the death camps of America. That is one thing all of us can participate in, and we should do it right away. They're not there packing them in there like sardines. Now they're gonna make them work. That's concentration camp slavery. Let's end it.
43 corporations, as we understand, are involved in profiteering from prison slave labor, from death camp slave labor.
So let's call a general strike.
Uhuru, thank you. We have a question.
Yeah, I wanted to respond to Esther. I think that one of the greatest concerns right now for this movement is for us to be able to organize and mobilize the Black communities. And I just want to put a challenge out to all of our participants that's listening to this webinar, is that, we all know what's going on. And I believe that, this is an opportunity for us to seize, to bring about the changes that the people really need to see in the Black community. No offense to any other nationality or race, but as a Black people living in America, we know for a fact that we have been marginalized. We have been suffering for a very long time under this type of colonialism, all of these things. I don't know all the big fancy words, but the truth of the fact is that we are not going to tolerate this type of treatment anymore in this America, in this so-called America that we live in, without advancing ourselves as Black people. And I believe that this is the opportunity for us to get it right, all the way right this time. Thank you.
Uhuru, we have a question coming in from Sister Ashaki Binta. The question is, what are the concrete recommendations for the electoral arena between now and November? Are we saying the masses should vote or not vote this November? Or what other actions concretely should the masses be doing? We have to unmute Brother Ralph if he's trying to speak.
Yes.
Yeah.
Am I unmuted?
Yes.
Yes. For those who are involving themselves in the electoral process, and I'm not saying I am one of those, but I would suggest all of those who involve themselves in the electoral process have a demand for their vote. Now, our organization, our demand is free all political prisoners. Other demands, and I think it's very important for all people, and particularly our people, is single payer health care, universal health. And if you don't deal with those two issues, you're wasting your time and your vote, and you're practicing political slavery. Thank you.
Uhuru, this is Leesa. What I tell anybody is that voting is supposed to be about supporting people who represent your interests. And when there are none, you just do not vote for them. And for me, it is just that simple. You don't vote for them. You find the one who is representing your interests, which means if it's not a Democrat, if it's not a Republican, but if it's some third-party candidate, then that is the one who will get my vote. For me, you have to be anti-war and you have to be pro-reparations, at least, to get my vote. If you're not going to get it. And I would love to see Black people at least move to that point, and our ancestors did not die for us to vote for our own oppression. They did not die for us to participate in a process in which we vote for people who have oppressed us and voted against us and were racist and who designed crime bills and all that kind of stuff. So that's how I feel about it.
No, I agree with Sister Leesa. I gotta speak to that as a as a elected official myself. I know for a fact that the voting process is racist, it's discriminatory, and it does not work for us as Black people. So we got to stop doing the same old. And I think Sister Leesa said it early, that a vote for the best of two evils is voting for just plain out evil, because that's what they're using us as a tool to push their agendas through. And this is what has to stop. As Black people, I'm not voting for anyone that does not have a Black agenda. What are you going to do for us as Black people, period?
Uhuru, on that note, we have to move the program. We have to move to our call for membership and resources. Thank you to everybody who has been viewing. Our viewership has increased. Thank you to the questions that have come in. There are some great questions coming in, which means that this discussion is very much appreciated, but we have to raise these resources so that we can continue to exist, so that we can continue to answer these kind of questions, right? You understand me? So I would like to invite Reverend Pinckney to help me make this call. I do want to remind everybody that we have a goal of raising $2,000 over the weekend. We met $1,000 yesterday, and I want to say that Reverend Pinckney pledged $100 today. Reverend Pinckney pledged $100 today to kick us off. We have Chad, who sent in $10. We have Elliot, who sent in $15. We have Kobina Bantushango, watching from Huntsville, Alabama, who sent $25. And we have Nasir from Kuwait, who actually sent $50. He made his pledge of $25 yesterday, as well as gave another $25 today. And as I was speaking right now, a membership just came in for a 3-year membership for $75, wanting to join the healthcare working group from Jamila, based out of Louisiana. So thank you, Jamila, Uhuru. And I'm gonna turn it over to Ralph to help us raise these resources.
Uhuru, I really appreciate all of our panelists today. Such a powerful discussion. And Jama, you know, you touched my heart when you talked about Chicago, because I was born and raised in Chicago, on the west side of Chicago, a product of John Marshall High School. And I always remember going, having Black doctors and Black stores everywhere. I never saw a Black store in our community on the west side of Chicago. And but you really touched it. I understand exactly where you was going with that, which was really beautiful. And Leesa, when you talk about healthcare at this time, is crucial. It's crucial. Your presentation was just gigantic. And I don't even have to say much about the chairman himself, because the chairman, when he go down through there, he really is everything was so educational today. And I tell you, it was just tremendous. The Black is Back Coalition is dedicated to bringing the type of education to the Black community that we brought today. To help our people, it is now time for us to call on you to help the coalition continue to do this kind of work. We actually need you to donate. I know one thing that Ralph and Betty always talked about, they said, well, you got to have resources in order to fight. And Betty and Ralph will always say, and they put their money where their mouth. And when they say stuff, and that's why I have so much love and respect for them, because they're there. But we're asking people who are listening today that to provide, whatever you can give. We're not trying to, because I know it's a time. If you can give anything, 10, 20, 50, 1,000, 2,000, we don't care. Just do something, because we're on the battlefield, and this is your opportunity to be on the battlefield with us. On that note, I turn it over.
Uhuru, Reverend Pinckney, I just have a question for you, because you are a member of the steering committee, representative of the Black Autonomy Network Community Organization.
Yes.
As an organization that is a part of an organization of organizations, what is your experience being a part of this organization? And also, what made you decide to join the coalition?
Wow, the first time I came down, Ralph and Betty brought me in, and it was just tremendous. The education that I received from the coalition itself was just so tremendous that I had to come and join and tell other people about it. And I'm so proud just to be part of this organization. Black is Back Coalition is an organization that people should be joining and get the wisdom and the knowledge from each of us, especially the chairman himself. He's so well read in everything that he's done, and I'm just in love with him, and I'm willing to come forward and do whatever I can to help Black is Back Coalition.
Uhuru. So we are making a call on all individuals who would like to join the Black is Back Coalition to become a member today by visiting blackisbackcoalition.org. The link has been typed into the chat. The coalition is made up of 17 organizations and many individuals who are assigned to one of our working groups. They include Black Community Control of the Police, the Reparations Working Group, Healthcare Working Group, Free All Political Prisoners Working Group. And I want to announce that individual membership fees are $25 a year, and a member is given an official Black is Back membership card. You can also join, just as Jamila joined. You can join for multiple years at once. You can join for up to 3 years with one payment. Reverend Pinckney, to you.
Amen. And we are also asking for any Black organization that would love to be part of the coalition to join today. Visit blackisbackcoalition.org. Organizational membership fees are $200 a year for international organization, $150 a year for national organization, $50 a year for state and local organization. Organizations are given a certificate of affiliation, and a representative of the organization will sit on the steering committee of the coalition. Again, the website is blackisbackcoalition.org. Let me repeat that. The website is blackisbackcoalition.org. We need your support in order to go forward. We need your help.
Uhuru, we have a $25 payment that just came in from Comrade Wendy Craig. Thank you, Comrade Wendy. Wendy actually contributed $20 yesterday. Okay. So she has increased her contribution to the coalition. We are also, that was our call for membership. We are also calling our viewers, whether you are a member already or not, to make a financial contribution. As been stated before, we have a goal of raising $1,000 today, $2,000 over the weekend. Yesterday we raised $1,000. Today we Okay, I'm seeing more research coming in. We are steady raising and getting closer to our goal. So we encourage you to please share. If you appreciated this type of discussion, we want to continue to be able to do this, not only via web platforms like this, but also in person. And also we want to continue the work of the coalition itself. These resources go to funding the work of our working groups, our Black Community Control of the Police working groups, our reparations working group, our healthcare working group. Everything that you've heard discussed has a working group attached to it because we believe in actually doing the work. Uhuru.
I actually strongly believe that, that the Black is Back Coalition is an organization that you will want to join and also want to donate to. We do go out and do the work. We have a track record where you can see the work that we're doing today, even extending this thing even further than we normally do. So I'm excited today, and those of you who are out there listening, this is an opportunity for you to get involved, because whether you like it or not, we are in a war, and you're going to need a strong organization like Black is Back Coalition to help support you. On that note, it's time for us to move on.
Uhuru, wait, we have some more resources coming in that I want to announce.
All right.
We have Comrade Kabula watching us from Chicago, who has contributed $100. We have Jacob, who has contributed $30. We have Comrade Matsamela, who has contributed $25. And I'm also seeing Comrade Aisha Fields, Dr. Aisha Fields, who was a presenter yesterday, who has contributed $10. So we will count this up. We will move the program forward, as Reverend Pinckney was saying, and we'll come back and try to meet our goal. Uhuru.
Well, maybe we're doing so good with, by talking.
Keep pitching, right? That's
right.
what I think.
Maybe we shouldn't just cut it off right now, because some people might think they won't be able to donate if we move the program along. But I just want to tell everybody who's listening that, this is a tremendous opportunity, not only for you, but to be part of Black is Back Coalition. It's a dream to me, because I never thought that I would be part of something this wonderful, this great, and the people that's involved with this, with Black is Back Coalition is just tremendous. You would love it. All you need to do is just come forward, and we need resources. We cannot operate without resources. I know that's what Ralph and Betty always told me, and I believe when they say something, I believe them, because I don't believe that that either one of them would lie. So this is your opportunity. Those of you who are out there listening, please donate.
Am I on?
Oh, go ahead, Reverend.
We must remember that Reverend Pinckney is a preacher. Fundraising comes in 3 or 4 times, and he's put me on the spot. So I'm going to try to keep up with Reverend Pinckney. I'm donating $100.
All right, see, that's what I'm talking about. Who else will believe this? See, this is what I'm talking about. Here come Belinda Brown now. Talk to me, Belinda.
Right. Let me get here. I just checked Elikia and told her to send me the information or announce the information on how you go, because I'm trying to figure that out. But I want to say that the Black is Back Coalition, this is a movement. And I'm so excited to be a part of it. I was introduced to it, I guess, via Betty and Ralph, through Pastor Pinckney, which is my spiritual father, which is an awesome person. I love him dearly, and I will follow him to the end of the earth, because he's genuine, he's real, and he put his he put his the proof with the pudding. Okay, when he say he's gonna do something, he's gonna do it. And those are the type of people that I have experienced in being a part of the Black is Back Coalition. When Louisiana have been facing some serious crisis here, and we announced our campaign for the unanimous is not enough, none other than the Chairman Omali himself, came to Louisiana and stood with us. Not only that, what I love about it is that when we call, they come. And he came on his own expense. You know, he didn't do like some of these other fake organizations out here, and I can talk about a lot of them and call their names that you know, put their self all in the spotlight, but they don't do nothing. But Chairman Omali came on his own expense, and I think he spent a better than 2 or 3 days with us, traveled around with us, got a chance to go and visit none other than St. John the Baptist Parish. You know, went to court with us. So this is the type of organization or movement that I encourage everybody to be a part of, because we're well on our way to something big. Something big for us as a Black people is to be a part of a coalition like Black is Back. And we are back, and we're not going anywhere.
All right.
Ooh,
And those,
I just want to announce some more that just came in. We have our chairman, Omali Yeshitela, who made a $100 contribution.
all
We
right.
have Ruby that made $25 contribution. We have Comrade Matum, who actually contributed yesterday, and today he did an additional $50. We have Ralph Pointer, who has pledged $100. We have another membership that just came in, Morgan, for a year-long membership, wants to join the reparations working group. So that is another $25. Reverend Pinckney, I know you were just about to say something, so you can say something while I
want you, Alikia, put me down for $50.
All right.
This is Leesa. I'll contribute another 25. But I also just want to say that to join the healthcare working group, it's not about the knowledge you have. You don't have to be a professional in the medical profession. You don't even have to be into naturopathic modalities. All you have to do is to care. And let me tell you something. We have gotten calls, and we have worked on campaigns since forming this healthcare working group, one of them being Baby Dylan. Immediately after this healthcare working group was formed, we got a call from a comrade in Philadelphia talking about this situation with Baby Dylan, in which the hospital in Philadelphia took a newborn baby against the will of the family and began injecting that baby with morphine injections because its mother had, you know, the sickle cell anemia disease. They didn't perform any kind of test. They did it against their mother. And they put out a yellow, what did they put out? They put out one of them warnings or whatever, because the family was trying to, the family was fighting and saying, we want our child. And so the hospital put out, I forget what you call one of them, alarm systems, Amber Alert or something like that, to basically say they're trying to come for their child and they're not going to do it. And we organized, we were on the phone. I never even made it to Philadelphia personally, but there were our comrades on the ground in Philadelphia. I want to thank them for that. They were protesting in front of the hospital. We got campaigns going to call people and writing letters. We had, I think, Brother Yab, Brother Diop, and just all over. So this is the kind of work that we can do. And all you have to do is to just care. That's all that's required, that you just care about your people.
Amen. Amen. And you know, this is going so well that I hate to stop now with the donations, because I know the donations are going to continue to come.
They're coming in.
And I do want to say one thing before we move on to the program, that we have an incident here where a young lady named Jessica Gray, we believe, was shot and killed by this young man. His daddy owned the barbecue joint here, and the police have not arrested this young man. And what we're trying to do is trying to force them to arrest him. They have not found her body. And it's been since December the 1st. I put up a reward myself for $500 for anybody who can give information. And I also want to know, want people to know, to spread the word here in the city of Benton Harbor, that we protect each other. And we do this not only in Benton Harbor, but in the state of Michigan and around the country. And this is why Black is Back Coalition is so important. Without them, we wouldn't be able to function. So those of you who are out there, go to your pockets, put that, if you got $10, send us $10. If you got $15, send us $15. Send us $20. Send us whatever you can, because we need the resources. out here to continue to fight this battle. So those of you out there, thank you so much for giving, but keep it going, because we're going to be on for at least another hour. We're not scheduled to be on for another hour, but I think we're going to be on for another hour, because I believe the closing remarks from our speaker, Ajamu Baraka and Leesa Dayvus, and the chairman Omali, Yeshitela, the one and only, are going to give closing remarks at down. We'll start with Ajamu. We'll start with you, and then we'll keep it moving. And Leesa, you will be next. Then we'll go to the chairman. Ajamu?
Yes, I need to be unmuted.
We hear you.
Okay, you hear me now?
Yes, you can.
Okay. All right, thank you so much, Reverend Pickney. And thank everybody for staying in, and of course, for digging deep and coming out with some resources, because as everybody said, these formations, they don't get no forward money. They're not getting no support from these liberal foundations. In fact, if you leave it up to the liberals, they would disappear us. So we only dependent on ourselves. So you believe in the absolute necessity for political independence, for us to be really self-determinant, that we do have to dig deep and support our institutions. So thank all of you. My comments are going to be brief. I know we've been covering a lot of terrain these last 2 days. And I think we have come to some good, I think we're clear about a number of the questions. So let me just say that what we have to do is this, is understand the moment. As I said earlier, basically, we have this pandemic only exposed the fragile nature of this global colonial capitalist system. Here we are looking at the second major crisis, economic collapses, if you will, structural collapses in 12 years. This has exposed the fact that this system, this already existing global capitalist system, is unable to address the objective human rights needs of the vast majority of the people on this planet. This is a planetary issue. So while we look at and talk about the US, we are doing the correct business by connecting up what is unfolding in the US as it relates to our people, and how this connects to the fact that we're part of a global system in crisis. We are correct in raising the fact that we are an African people in the US, but that our African people extend beyond the US. And so that's why we're so thankful that we got the calls from folks in London and folks from Colombia to talk about how we need to be connecting up these issues and what kind of reciprocal solidarity that people can engage in at this moment. The fact that it's global knowledge that African people are disproportionately suffering from this COVID-19. And we say, raise that contradiction. Criticize the US state for its inability to protect the fundamental human rights of African people and other people in this country. We understand our responsibilities as citizens of empire to take on this state, not only for ourselves, but for global humanity. That's the very definition of reciprocal solidarity. We ought to emphasize and re-emphasize over and over again. What we're seeing with this global pandemic is all of the contradictions. This pandemic has solidified as the global power. They're already the largest economy in terms of popular purchasing power. But in terms of prestige, this pandemic and the role that the Chinese have been playing has demonstrated the real limitations of the US. Isn't it interesting, in fact, almost hilarious, that the propagandists wanted to use the COVID-19 as a propaganda weapon against the Chinese. And now the US has ended up exposing the fragility of its economic system because now it is dependent on manufacturers coming from China to provide it its necessary medical equipment and supplies. This is an incredible and dangerous moment, my friends. We have talked about these last 2 days that, we need to identify the enemy. And we say the enemy is this colonial capitalist system. We need to bring our people's attention back to that objective structural reality. We have all kinds of things we could take a look at, but the bigger point, and in some ways the simpler point, is that we are subjected.
We can't hear you.
Uhuru, comrades, is frozen.
Uhuru, brother, Ajamu video is frozen. Malikia.
So what happens?
Well,
he didn't freeze it.
No, his internet connection is weakened.
Okay.
So I suggest we go on to the next panelist.
Okay.
Okay, so that, I guess that would be me. I see.
Yes, that's you, comrade.
Comrades, again, I'm so very, very happy to be here. Not so much happy that we have to have this conversation, but it's so important that we do have it since we are in the throes of what's going on. And first of all, I want to say that the Black is Back Coalition, we offer our heart and condolences to all those out there, all of our comrades who have, who are grieving, who have lost someone, because understand, I'm very aware that when I talk about the numbers in the United States and I talk about those who have, the numbers of people who have died, I am also talking about our comrades. I am talking about their family members. They are also a part of that number. We had a beautiful, beautiful sister, strong in the movement, Sister Nicola, who transitioned. We know we have members of the Black is Back Coalition who have lost their family members, and we want to keep those numbers very small. And so when I do talk about these numbers, I want people to understand that we know what that represents, and we feel for all of you out there. We feel for our communities that are going through it, and we are in that. And that's why this is so personal to me and so passionate to all of us. I want to just first of all say that we know we're going through it. We know it's real. We know we're grieving, but we are with you. And together we can come through this. And with that, I'm going to put forward some recommendations based on my more than 20 years of working with some naturopathic modalities and going in them hospitals and visiting people, visiting comrades. We had a comrade who had a stroke right in front of me. Right? I didn't even know what a stroke looked like at that time. This was about a year ago, but I'm very happy to say that based on the things that I had learned and based on the community coming together, we were able to be in that hospital with that comrade. I was able to get permission from the family member of this comrade who was located on the opposite coast. And this comrade was in his close to 80, and his brother was about that age as well. And so I said to his brother, I want to make close connections with his family. And I said to him, I asked him, I said, would you mind if I could talk to the doctors and stuff about the medications? And he said yes. And I said to him, I said, I can help be your eyes and your ears. I understand that you are the primary caregiver, and I always like to respect those boundaries, but I did put it forward like I can help be your eyes and your ears for you. And so we can do this teamwork. And I encourage everybody, whenever you go into those hospitals, to please have a book like this, the physician's desk reference, the PDR reference, the pill book. We need to be monitoring those medications. We need to watch what is going on. We need to believe our eyes and our ears. And because I was monitoring those medications, when they gave him medication and he began to have internal bleeding, and I understood that heparin causes internal bleeding, I was able to pull that up. I was able to talk with his brother. I was able to send that research to his brother, and his brother then reached out to the hospital, to the doctors, and said, this is what I hear is going on with that. The doctor said, oh, no, we don't believe that that's causing that. But when I went back to the hospital later on that day, I could see that they had removed the heparin from him, and it stopped the internal bleeding. So I know that we cannot get into the hospitals, but that does not mean that we cannot be active in the care of our loved ones. This is important. I have heard from some nurses that some of the doctors are taking it upon themselves to talk to patients who are sick about do not resuscitate orders. One of the things that you can do is, if you have a loved one who has to go into that hospital, you can say to the doctors, do not discuss with your family members anything about do not resuscitate orders. That's a real horrible position to be in. The person has no family members around them, and then a doctor's going to talk with them, a person who is sick. The worst time to talk to somebody about that stuff is when they are so emotionally hurting and vulnerable. So we can begin to say to the hospitals, do not talk with them about do not resuscitate orders. We do not want that. We should begin to, just because they're not talking about nutrition, we can talk about it. We should say to them, we have been hearing things about vitamin C. Yesterday, I presented a presentation, which I will make available. I called it My Home Remedies, what I, Leesa Dayvus, would be doing, because this is my plan. If a family member of mine has to go into that hospital, I'm gonna say to them immediately, do not talk with anybody about do not resuscitate orders. I'm going to talk with them about implementing vitamin C, and I'm going to have references of other doctors, other healthcare professionals who have done this and where it has been successful. The hospitals in China have published some of their protocols. I'm going to make sure that you all get that information. And that is information that you can begin to talk with your healthcare provider about. These are very important strategies that we can implement now. And we should all, I'm sorry, I thought I heard somebody say something. So we can begin to implement these kind of strategies now. We should never feel that we have to go into any hospital situation or talking to any doctor, not feeling that we have power. And the kind of relationship that we can look at it as is that we are on the same team. We have to develop teamwork. It is not about trust, but it is about teamwork and building a strong team in which you can also implement ideas to help ensure that your loved ones return home. And also we have also strategies and things that we can begin to do to help ourselves, to help build up our immunities and our immune system. And that all that information will be made available for you to have if you want to look at some of my strategies and things that I am implementing for my family and for myself to ensure that we can come through this pandemic.
Overall, yeah, I was just announcing that we are at time and we have to, to the next closement.
May I ask that we give a tally before I make my presentation where we are in terms of, is that all right with you, good Reverend?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay.
All right, so I do want to name some more people. We have Comrade Glenn Ford, who has contributed $100. He's a Mexican committee. Comrade Inyendu, $20. Peter, $25. Jihad and the Jericho movement has pledged $100. We have Sister Belinda Parker Brown, as she stated, pledged $50. Leesa Dayvus. We have Khalid Rahim, who gave $10. Teresha Gordon, who has given $5. And with what I have tallied, today we have made $1,150. which means that for the weekend so far, we have made $2,150. So we have surpassed our $2,000 goal.
Uhuru, one of our comrades said she tried
We
to
have
donation.
surpassed our $2,000 goal by $150.
Sister Betty was about to say something.
One of our comrades said she's been trying to donate to the blackisbackcoalition.org, but she keeps getting a message that her email to them cannot be sent at this time. So I'm going to just out her. Sister Dolores, she's a longtime activist for Pacifica Sisters. Leesa knows her very well.
Yes.
Yes. And I just wanted to let you know, you got another $100 coming from her. She's in so many organizations. She's a real comrade who believes in collaborating and unity in the movement. So thank you, Sister Dolores.
And this is Brother Cam, also donated $50.
All right.
All right. All right. All right.
Splendid.
Oh, Brother Cam, you were saying something?
He donated.
That was just also donated.
Wait, Uhuru, wait, I just want to get clarity from Cam because I do have a first 50 from you, which I announced. Are you saying you added another 50 or is that the same?
Here you announced that, so I was just sharing with you.
Okay, all right, because I did get a text from somebody else too saying your name. I do want to say.
So Jamu was trying to come back.
Jamu, what I figure out, we had another donation.
Uhuru Jamu.
Yes, I just wanted to let people know that I was back, and before we went to the chairman for his final comments, I just wanted to ask if I can get 5 minutes to put in a last few comments.
Sure. Go ahead, comrade.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Basically, I apologize for the drop. I just want to just end my comments by just suggesting that at this critical moment, we have to be very, very strategic. And there's some transitional demands that we can make that help to bring real relief to our people, while at the same time exposing the internal contradictions of this system's inability to address the human rights of our folks. Our folks now are facing their second paycheck or lack of a paycheck. We need some immediate demands right now, saying basically we need a 90-day moratorium on all rent, mortgages, and utility bills. We should be demanding that there's an immediate expansion of improved Medicare for all. We need to demand that all of these so-called essential workers receive hazard pay and have the supplies, the protective gear that they in fact need in order to carry out their jobs. We need to demand that they remove all work requirements from the SNAP program, the food stamp program. People are suffering. They need immediate relief. And all this BS about a requirement to work when the economy has basically collapsed needs to be squashed. We need an expansion of Medicaid and a real commitment to invest in community centers. We need a universal basic income for all for at least the next 6 months. And we need to call for and demand universal free child care. Okay, so these are some things that we can be raised or consider being to raise as a movement, as a coalition, as organizations that are pushing the capitalists back on their heels because they don't want to address these kinds of demands. But we know they have no choice but to do that. Okay, so I end there, my friends. It's been a pleasure to be part of this. Let's keep on organizing, let's keep on struggling, and victory is ours.
Uhuru, I want to thank Comrade Ajamu and recognize the difficulty surrounding your presentation in terms of the problems that you have with the internet. I really think that you made an incredible presentation and contribution to this entire discussion. And so I'm quite conscious of what you must be experiencing at this moment in terms of the complications with the internet. I also would like to just recognize Comrade Glenn Ford. Again, he's not here. He's a dear comrade who's been in the trenches for a long time. And, you know, I mentioned Nellie Bailey has been one of the first out of the gate in terms of criticizing and denouncing Obama. And Glenn, of course, was just, he carried, for us, he carried our colors in that struggle with Obama earlier on, and he's just been an incredible force, and I wanted to acknowledge him. Comrade Khalid Rahim, who is a member of the steering committee, he was not, I did not see him earlier on, but I'm glad to see that he has announced his presence in this process. So I wanted to just say that. I can't overstate the significance of this steering committee. The struggles exist among us, but that's why there's a coalition as opposed to just one single kind of organization. But there's unity and struggle, and it is unity that is defining this relationship more than struggle. And even when we talk about struggle, we're talking about people who are really in the trenches. It's hard. You can only go so far in terms of struggling with somebody who made the kind of dedicated commitment that we see that's been made by people in this process. And Ajamu, I don't know, I think that's pretty selfish if you're sitting up there eating, everybody can see it. And
I'm gonna fine him $50.
But it's just an incredible steering committee, and you can see that from all the different positions and angles that we approach this struggle, and just how dynamic it makes this coalition. And so I'm really appreciative of that. And I just want to say in closing that one thing is protect yourselves. Protect yourselves. I mean, we're doing certain kinds of work in various places to try to help the people do that. You've heard Comrade Sister Leesa talk about it on yesterday. You heard Comrade Sister Dr. Aisha Fields talking about some of the things that can be done, will be done. We are on the ground teaching people how to make masks, simply how to make masks, because in some places, especially like in Africa, like in Africa, like in South Chicago, it's hard to get, like resources like masks and all of this stuff. But, we're teaching people how to do that. Folks should, really take it seriously and protect yourselves. And so I just wanted to say that. And also, I'm glad that this discussion went some of the places we were able to go today. I think there's a absolute denunciation of capitalism and colonialism as we understand it. And it has to be destroyed. And the United States is a strategic enemy of the whole world. And so US imperialism has to be stopped. That's what our responsibility is, those of us who are here in the United States. As for some questions that, we heard raised earlier on. Well, somebody raised a question about, I think it's Chichawa Masimba to the panelists, saying that he thinks this moment in history makes untenable the idea that we should just assume positions inside the US state apparatus as the primary method of struggle. It is falling apart, and we are increasingly forced to see that we must rely on ourselves, and that the only thing they can do for us is bleed us. We have to continue building instruments that assume we will govern on the other side of this. And I think that's right. We have to really do that, build for that. And it can be overstated. Some people again will say, well, yeah, we know in the long term, you got to do this in the long term. But I'm 78 years old. They've been saying that since I've been alive. Get here. And we're going to do it in a long time, after a while, one day, et cetera, you know? So the time is now. And that has to be, you know, like the top of our agenda, actually building the capacity to govern ourselves and putting in place the instruments that make that happen. I have no loyalty to this country. I have no loyalty. Actually, the African has no country. That's part of what it is that we're fighting for our own country, for our own capacity, for our own system. I have no loyalty to it. And I want everybody, I hope nobody has a problem with that. I used to hear people say silly stuff like, we oppose the war, but we support the troops. Like we oppose the killing, but we support the killers. You understand? The truth of the matter is America will never do good by us. And it came into being, and our condition came into being as a consequence of this relationship imposed on us by gunpoint. It was imposed on us at gunpoint, that we did not volunteer for this relationship. And I hear people frequently talking about how the United States is a nation of immigrants, and I say that's a lie. In the first place, it's not a nation, it's a prison of nations. It's a prison of nations. Ask all these other people who are suffering just as we suffer on their land by these interlopers who came and stole their resources, stole their land, and brought us here. It's not a nation, it's a prison of nations. And we are not immigrants, we're captives. I think it's really important to understand that we live in captivity. We are captives. And so, I mean, in the final analysis, when you listen to Comrades Ralph and Jihad talking about the prison question, when have we not been in prison? I mean, that's what Comrade Cam Howard mentioned on either today or yesterday, the 13th Amendment, that just gave the being in prison a different look, a different characterization. The 13th Amendment codified slavery after slavery was supposed to be over. So I have no country, and that's what I'm fighting for right now. I have no loyalty to this country. I make no pretext. I don't have to say things like I oppose being opposed to this politician or that politician doesn't mean I'm opposed to America. I'm opposed to America. I'm opposed to it. From every fiber of my existence, I cannot not be opposed to America, knowing how it came into existence and how it continues to exist right now. It is absolutely necessary for America to oppress us. It is a function of its existence. It is absolutely necessary. There's no way that it can exist without doing what it does to us. So yeah, I'm opposed to it. And so I just wanted to say that it's really important that we raise some of the questions that capitalism has to go. It has to go just in general, but it also has to go because it rests upon the foundation of our slavery, our colonial slavery. I mean, it's not like Jesus came to white people one day and said, okay, here, y'all have every damn thing and nobody else has anything. No, it's the foundation of it is us. Capitalism came into existence by selling my grandmama and et cetera. So it has no redeeming qualities. So I'm glad to see that. And I'm glad to see that we are grappling as Sister Brenda Parker Brown, tussling with this whole question of colonialism. We are a colonized people. Yeah. That means that some other country, some other state controls every aspect of our lives. They determine if and when we can eat, what we eat. Sister Leesa was talking about how even our diets have, and Cam, talking about how our diets and what have been changed as a consequence of this external interloping force, alien and hostile force, taking control over every aspect of our lives. If you know you're colonized, then you know the solution is not trying to find a better place in the colonizer's house. It's like Malcolm would say, who in the hell wants to integrate into a burning house? If you know you're colonized, the objective has to be to overturn colonialism. If you know you're a slave, the objective has to be to kill the slave master and destroy the system of slavery. That's what it has to be. In the process of doing that, we want to take back everything the slave master has stolen from us so that we can have a decent life and our people can have a decent life. But the slave master has to be destroyed, has to be annihilated, has to be wiped out. Slavery has to go. Colonialism has to go. And I'm glad that we've come to this place of understanding, listening to the participants in this conference on today. So I'm hoping that the steering committee will be able to meet on this coming Saturday so we can sum up this process that we've just gone through, so we can, sum up and see how we feel about what just happened with this process. And then we can say, like how we're going to be meeting, beyond that. And we also at some point in the near future have to examine, as soon as it is possible, have to look at whether or not we'll be able to do our June electoral school like this, or whether we will be able to do it in person. And I miss y'all. So if we have to do it like this, that's cool. But if we can do it in person, I'd rather do that as well. Because, I know if you're like me, you feel like you're under house arrest. And I got everything except the ghetto jewelry, that bracelet, that they stick on us. But I just want to thank everybody and turn it back over to Comrade Elikia and tell us about the last 1,000 that just came in, and you can close.
Okay. So, I'm going to take Reverend Pinckney's lead on this because he's the expert. But we've raised a total of 1,320 today and 1,000 yesterday, which means that we have a total of $2,320. And I want to read some comments that have.
What about pledges? Does that include the pledges?
That includes the pledges, yes.
Okay.
We have Brother Larry Wells, who is a member of the coalition, actually. He's contributed $50. I think I announced Jihad a bit earlier. We have Inyendu, who gave an additional $20 to what he originally gave. So that's what put us at the 1,320. We have Sister Efia Nwengaza, who's watching from Greenville, South Carolina, who says she wants to express appreciation for the opportunity to broadcast this event on WMXP Community Radio. We have
she is a former member of the coalition, by the way, and the former organizer for the Student Nonviolent Organizing Committee, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, and one of the persons involved in the Atlanta project that produced the paper that resulted in the Black Power statement coming from the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. Go ahead.
We have Brother Bilal Mafundi Ali, who says much gratitude for this webinar. All power to the people. We have a Yasun who says, Uhuru, greetings from Ghana. My first time in this esteemed meeting. We have a sister who tuned in from Nairobi, Kenya, and just wanted to let us know that they were watching from. I'm trying to see some more. Oh, we have, thank you, Mimi Rosenberg. Thank you for the strategic web conference on the life and death issues of health in the community of African ancestry at this time. We need a single payer healthcare system, and now is the time. That's for the leadership, and thanks for the leadership and comradeship. Reverend Pinckney, I'm gonna turn it over to you, but we just thank everybody for tuning in, for viewing. Right now, we still have 86 people with us. Thank you for your contributions, those who have joined. And I'm gonna hand it over to Reverend Edward Pinckney.
Call Pinckney.
Thank you so much. Listen, we would like to remind everyone that the Black is Back Coalition is holding our 4th electoral campaign school, previously scheduled for today and tomorrow on June the 13th and 14th, 2020. We don't know what's going to happen, but we're still scheduling it. It might open up by then. We don't know. The coalition created these schools to teach the Black community how electoral politics can and should be approached in a revolutionary way, and the kind of platform we should demand of those who run for office in our community. keep up with the coalition website, blackisbackcoalition.org. And also, I want you to keep up with that. Those of you who are out there who have not yet donated, you still have an opportunity to donate even after we leave this web for right now. But we're asking everybody to give, as well as our Facebook page is up also. Black is Back is to remain, we're going to update on the school. Just go to the website and you can attend. It's going to be in St. Louis, Missouri, and we want people to understand that it's a strong possibility we will be able to meet face to face. I don't know yet, but we're looking forward to it. On that note, I'll turn it
Pray
back.
for us, Rev.
All right. We don't know.
Leesa,
we have a $25 donation that just came in from John Dunlap. Thank you, John. That's another 25.
This is Lisa. I just wanted to throw in a very important announcement, which I have forgot to mention earlier, but there's an issue now about ventilators and whether or not they are the best mode to go or not. So I'm going to make sure that an article gets on the Black is Back website about this, because this will also help to give us other things we can talk about, like maybe they could use some other kind of ways to get oxygen to the body of our loved ones, but important information we need to be aware of. So that will be forthcoming today.
Absolutely.
Uhuru, I want to get to the next announcement. Thank you, Sister Lisa. Thank you, Reverend Pinckney, for the first announcement. I'd like to announce that the African National Women's Organization, which is an organizational member of the Black is Back Coalition, is holding their 5th anniversary convention titled the Black Women's Convention, Sisters United for the Revolution. It's going to be held on July 10th through 12th, 2020. To keep up with the convention, visit Annual Uhuru, that's ANWOUHURU.org. Also follow the official African National Women's Organization's Facebook like page. They're on Instagram, also on Twitter. That's where all of their announcements will be made. Reverend Pinckney, there's one more announcement.
Ajamu was trying to say something also. Yeah.
Oh, I can't see it.
You're just very quickly just to remind people, this is an announcement, I guess. For those folks who are just sort of tuning in to the Black is Back Coalition, it is important for them to know that this coalition has been the only all-Black coalition that has consistently had a presence in opposition to the White House for the last 10, 11 years. And that in the fall, in November, there's going to be another mobilization of this coalition, because we understand that no matter who sits in the white people's house, we still have to fight. So people know about it and be prepared to get information and to mobilize with us in November.
I want to appreciate that comment from Comrade Ajamu, because coming out of this struggle we're involved in now with this colonial virus, we want to be strong enough so when we march on the White House, somebody with a bullhorn can order people to come out with their hands on their head and to assume the position, and so we can empty some of these prisons and stick somebody else who ought to be in the joints there. Comrade Alicia.
Chairman,
Uhuru.
I would just like, on the behalf of the Education Working Group, to invite anyone who cares about Black community control to contact us at ralph.pointer@gmail.com. I would also like to acknowledge my comrades, Dr. Deborah Isom, for her assistance in helping me get the Educational Committee report together. I did not have time to give the complete report, but hopefully in June, you will know that your family members all over the United States are doing their schooling at home, and they're using culturally significant and relevant anti-metaphysical imperialistic curriculum. And I want to salute the Black New Yorkers for Educational Excellence. They have repeatedly been on top of this, and I will be referring to the Black is Back Coalition some of their materials, especially Dr. Cody. And again, I want to acknowledge Dr. Deborah Jacobs and Dr. Deborah Isom, and Sister Mary Adams and Ricardo Adams in Chicago for sharing their insights regarding an educational curriculum for this time when we are homeschooling. And we need to come out of this with a strategy to take back our community schools. This electoral process in June, one of the things you're going to learn is how to take over your public education board.
Right on, right on. Uhuru.
Uhuru. I have an announcement from Sister Belinda Parker Brown. It says on May 20th, 2020, the online state of the state report and community meeting on Louisiana's response to the COVID-19 pandemic. The details are to be announced. However, you can join Louisiana United International on Facebook at facebook.com, and then the like page is actually called Louisiana United International. Also, she's calling for the support of the campaign ELARA, which stands for Enhanced Legislative Access and Relief Act, ELARA, because injustice doesn't self-quarantine even when we must. Learn more at facebook.com, type in campaign ELARA, that's all capitals, ELARA, Uhuru. I'm turning it over to Reverend Pinckney.
And closing remarks at this time is that we already know how much came in. We know about the memberships, but I want to thank this wonderful panel that we had today. Black is Back. The coalition itself has done a tremendous job, and I want people to continue to give. Take your time, even though we're ending it for now, but you can always go to Black is Back website and donate money to keep this organization going. And you can join, because we need your help. On that note, I'm going to turn it over to the chairman.
Comrades, I want to just express appreciation to everybody, all of you comrades who came on and participated in this conference with us. We are highly appreciative. We would like to see you continue your support and participation with this coalition. You've heard the information about what it takes to join, but even if you're not thinking about joining right now, you can support this coalition. You can come out to our events. There's been some announcements of events that we're going to be having. We would really like for you to go to our webpage. It's blackisbackcoalition.org to check up on us. And then you can check up on all of the different organizations that participate in this coalition. I just want to thank you again. Thank everybody from the steering committee, all the people here, that 82 people are still with us through this process. And we are highly appreciative. And I just want to say that we can win. We are winning. Uhuru.
All right.
Uhuru.
On that note, we will say
Black is back.
Black is back. Black is back.
Black is back. Black is back.
Black is back.
Black is back.
Black is back.
Black is back.
Black is back. And the rallying call is Black is back. And all of those people who wanted to be mobilized and do work without fear of being